Okay, hello everybody. How you guys doing? Starting on time today. My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World, what's happening. So today we're going to talk about mainly abortion. Um, Specifically very bad conservative arguments against abortion. We're going to be examining some of those. Going to spend the first hour going over some comments from a viewer that we have, a very prolific viewer that comments a lot, and we're going to go over some of his arguments there. And then also we're going to spend the second hour basically dunking on Ben Shapiro. So if you just came to see me, you know, if you just came to see me to dunk on Ben Shapiro, come back at around 12 o'clock or so, because that's what we'll start doing that. But before we get into it, let's take a look at what we're working on now. So this is our piece that we've been doing for the last couple of days. We've kind of done a lot to get rid of the seam in the middle here, although you can still kind of see it right there, like right around here. So we're going to be working on that a little bit, just a couple of, just to sort of get rid of that illusion that it's like been chopped in half there. So I have a viewer named 1911 greater than all, which I think his username is in reference to a pistol, I think, because he's like a pretty big time, gun advocate kind of person, Second Amendment type person. And we had a little bit of a discussion the other day, basically about abortion rights. And, oh, wait a minute, I need to make a layer beneath this. We need to bring this up. And then here we need to get our paint bucket. There we go. That looks better. Okay, now we can go back to that. So, yeah, we had a little bit of a discussion about trans rights and abortion and bodily autonomy and a couple of other things. And I said that I would respond to him during the stream. So I realize that this isn't really that fair because it's like a one-way discussion, you know? But I think this is I think my viewers will benefit from just examining the arguments that our good friend 1911 actually made. So I'm not going to be, I mean, I'm going to do this in such a way as to not be super mean because, he's a nice person. He's not a jerk or anything like that. But I just think very, very bad arguments, right? So, Lewis the Hedgehog, hey, what's going on, man? So, what we're going to do is I have his comments here like this, and we're going to give me 1 second here. Let me just arrange some monitors and stuff. And we're going to turn on my laptop window. These are the comments that I'm going to be responding to, right? Background, of course, all of you know that the Supreme Court, there was a leaked draft of a Supreme Court decision, which is basically going to overturn Roe v. Wade, which will lead to abortion becoming immediately outlawed in roughly 23 states. And yeah, the right wing is kind of going into overdrive on this, trying to deflect from this fact because, you know, abortion is actually popular in the country. And so there's been lots of news stories about how they're trying to find the person who leaked it and all that other crap. And there's been some, speculation that it may have been a conservative staffer that leaked it because now it sort of locks in this decision. And if the justices, like a few of the justices, may have been like on the fence here, and now if they actually switch to the other side, it makes them look like they're bowing to public pressure and all this other baloney. But Somehow I think that's, probably the case, right? But I don't know. I could see also a more progressive lean, liberal leaning staffer leaking it too, just to get ahead of the game in order to like, expose this, maybe on the off chance that they might decide not to go through with it. So I could see it either way. It could, could go either way, but that's basically the background here. And this is why for the last 3 weeks everybody's been talking about abortion so much, because these things matter, you know. And I think what it is that we growing up here, in the last 40 years, I mean, Roe v. Wade was before I was even born, right? I myself personally have never known a time when, you know, abortion wasn't legal in some regard somewhere around the country, right? A lot of women born over the last 40 years have always taken this right for granted, and now it's going to be gone. And that's kind of a shock to people. It's like some people don't appreciate shit until you don't have it. Other people who have been fighting for this their whole lives in order to preserve this are now having a very bad time. They're very pissed off, right? And now you're seeing all kinds of like, like for example, there are protesters outside of Kavanaugh's house and stuff like that, and protests all around the country, and lots of criticism flying to the right wing and stuff like that. In the meantime, um, other politicians are like right wing politicians are suggesting all kinds of shit, like, talking about overturning all these other court cases that have to do with contraception, access to contraception, court cases that have to do with interracial marriage, with gay marriage, all that stuff. All of this shit is on the table now. And it's sort of like, people are kind of understanding now why the right wing lost these issues in the culture war in the first place. You know, people are kind of starting to understand. It's like, oh, this is why it's important. Oh, because when the fucking Christo fascists and like, conservative evangelicals and shit like that, when they actually get in power, they take things away from you. This is why. So the thing about it is now the people who actually are against abortion are having to, you know, actually explain their position, right? Their position, which is extremely unpopular. So here's a guy, this guy, 1911 greater than all, is a guy that comments on my channel a lot, and we kind of got into a little discussion about this. So let me start off with his comment here. You can see it. Roe v. Wade being overturned doesn't mean abortion is going to be gone. Let me just make that a little smaller so that you guys can actually see me draw and stuff in the background. I'll just put that down there. Doesn't mean abortion is going to be gone. It means it's going to be severely limited in scope and severity. The vast majority reason for abortions are out of convenience. It just means you go to another state to get your abortion. So let's kind of break that down a little bit, right? So first off, you notice how it says, it doesn't mean it'll be gone. It'll just be severely limited in scope and severity. Why, how does that make it any better? First off, like, why is that a better thing? Like, like we went over last week, abortion, that Roe v. Wade decision was made at the time with the understanding that abortion was a constitutional right. Okay. That's why they put the high standard to regulate it on there, right? It was understood that this is what the Constitution like guaranteed this for you. So if the state, I can't what exactly, I have it written down here. It was the what was it called? It was the strict scrutiny standard is what that was. Right. And that's because they basically did it with the idea that, okay, this is a constitutional right. So if you're going to take it away, the state needs to have a very damn well good reason to do so. Right. So why is it, so basically Roe versus Wade is essentially when you're taking away the right to privacy is what you're doing. You're not just taking away the right to get an abortion. right? It's the right to privacy that has been removed. And if you read, Alito's draft on this, that's what he says. He says the right to privacy is not in the Constitution, right? And then he goes on to quote fucking witch burner, like witch hunters and shit from the fucking 16th century, but we'll talk about that later, right? So how does it make it any less egregious if your right to privacy is like preserved but in a different state? See, if you have to go somewhere else to exercise your rights, that means you don't have that right. That's what that means, right? If you are basically going to another state, if you have to travel, you know, somewhere else to, like, let's say you had the freedom of speech and they go, okay, well, your freedom of speech is now gone in Alabama, but if you go to Louisiana, you got your freedom of speech. So it's still okay. No, that's doesn't make sense when you put any other right in there. Let's take Second Amendment because 1911 is a big time Second Amendment guy. What if we just banned all guns in California? What if we just said every single gun ever in California is banned, no more? And people go, well, no, you're infringing on my Second Amendment right. And I go, well, you can just go to Nevada, own all the guns you want. There you go. Your Second Amendment is preserved. Doesn't really work that way, right? See, the thing is that what makes it a violation of your rights is the government doing it, you know. Now, if you were to say, okay, well, for example, your freedom of speech doesn't apply on this platform or something like that, that's a little bit different. You still have your freedom of speech, you just can't do it in my privately owned, studio or my privately owned um, stadium or whatever, or on my privately owned social media platform. That's a little bit different. Okay. That's not infringing on your rights. It's when the government makes something, basically takes your right away. It's when the government can throw you in jail for trying to exercise something that was, something that you formerly were allowed to do. That's when your right is being, violated. So no, that's not good enough. Just being like, yeah, just go over there and do it. Not good enough. During the Bush years, when people were protesting the Iraq war, they tried to do this with freedom of speech. They would in Washington say, okay, here's a free speech zone, right? You remember those, the free speech zones? That was an invention of George W. Bush in his White House, you know. And during the people were protesting the Iraq war, and it was like, okay, well, you can hold all the signs and want, you can protest all you want, but you got to do it over there in that little space where no one can see you, right? 3 miles away from the event that you're trying to protest at, right? In this little, and that's what it was. It was a free speech zone, and it was like a little sort of like fenced in area in between buildings and shit where nobody could get in, where nobody could see anything, where it was like a mile away from the actual like event, like they wanted to protest one of his speeches or something. Yeah, it's like, no. Did people go for that? No, they didn't. No, why? Because that's a violation of free speech. Okay. Because the government is not allowed to say you can say what you want over here, but not over there. Right? That's bullshit. And it's the same kind of thing. It's like, no, you're not going to have free abortion zones. That's fucking stupid as hell, dude. And it's a fundamental violation of someone's rights. Are abortions legal? Yes. They are currently legal right now, everywhere in the country. Right? Even now, this has not been overturned yet. They are legal everywhere in the country. Right? So who are you to say where and when someone is not allowed to exercise this right? It doesn't make any sense, right? And I'll even agree if you wanted to turn that around and talk about firearms. I'll agree with that too. There are no states in this country right now where firearms are illegal, where you're not allowed to buy or own firearms, right? There may be places you're not allowed to buy firearms, specific kinds of firearms. There may be local laws and regulations about what you can buy and where, right? But there's no place in this country where it's illegal. There's no place in this country where you're not allowed to own specific types of firearms. It's not like you're not allowed to own shotguns or something in California, or you're not allowed to own like, um, no, that's not a thing that happens either. You know, Chicago, for example, has gun control, but you can just go across the border. You can go right outside of the city and just, and if you own one of those guns, you can bring it right in and it's not against the law, right? Not exactly the same thing. And it's not exactly the same thing when you're just when it's purchasing something versus a medical procedure that you're getting on your body. That's another thing too, right? What if we passed a law that said you're not allowed to, um, let's say, open an eye clinic? Doesn't make any sense, does it? That's a lot different than like, see, because the thing with firearms is that you can compare it to something like tobacco or alcohol, something like that, right? Where it's like, okay, there has to be restrictions in order to keep children from getting a hold of it, in order to keep people who are not responsible, because you can hurt yourself and other people, right? Well, you can't really hurt other people with a medical procedure. That doesn't really make sense either. It's like, it's not like I can go get an abortion and then go into like a grade school and murder 17 people with it, right? Doesn't really work that way. So you got to keep these things in mind too. It's like there are such things as reasonable restrictions on rights. And I'll even grant putting reasonable restrictions on abortions as well, you know, because believe it or not, Roe versus Wade actually took some of those into account. It left open reasonable restrictions during the second and third trimesters. The state was allowed to put reasonable restrictions according to, for health and stuff like that, and outright ban it after, during and after the third trimester. It allows for abortion bans. So kind of sounds like a pretty good compromise to me. It's like you can get it under these restrictions, right? But the key point here is that you're allowed to get it. So that's the first thing. Second one, the vast majority reason for abortions are out of convenience. Okay. I don't buy that either. And it's because the women who actually get abortions aren't doing it just because they feel like not having a baby. That's that's kind of a stereotype, sort of like, fallacy bullshit reason that you hear like preachers and shit talk about. You know, they have this sort of idea that it's just women going, "Oh, I just want to sleep around with everybody that I want and have all the sex that I feel like, and if I get, pregnant, I'll just get an abortion because, fuck it, who cares? It's my right." Like, kind of making it sound like they're using abortion for birth control, right? And you get that a lot. Like if you listen to like, yeah, like as like TV preachers, like conservative preachers, people like Kenneth Hoagland, shit like that, and like fucking and Jay Sekulow, those types of people. That's what they'll make it sound like. They'll make it sound like this is what's happening. That like abortion is just being used as a form of birth control, and it's just this casual thing that women get all the time, right? In real life, that's not how the vast majority of abortions are from women who are, first off, young, in their 20s, right? And there are from women who usually already have children, and the reason why they're getting an abortion is because they can't afford to have another child, right? So this is what basically it is. More than half of abortions are from women who are in their 20s, from age 20 to 29, right? So it's 20 to 24 is about 27%, and then 25 to 29 is about 30%, right? So it comes out to like 57%, right? Of those, most of those women are really. So if you think about that, okay, like why? Why is it that age group? the most like where the most abortions are actually like performed, right? And it's because first off, that age group is younger, so they're having more sex, obviously, right? They're less likely to be married, right? They're less likely to be financially independent. So they're either living with their parents still, because people today live with their parents until they're like 30 and shit. And the reason why people today live with their parents so long is because wages are so low. And this is not, a new phenomenon. This is something that's been happening for like 30 years at this point because wages have not kept up with inflation over the last 30, 40 years. So people end up staying at home longer because they can't afford to live on their own by themselves and shit. So women end up staying at home longer. Either that or they end up, they'll live with like roommates and shit, right? Because they can't afford their own place, right? And that's the major reason. The major reason they get an abortion is because if they have a kid, it fucks up their like career, right? So they're either super young, still in college, stuff like that. And if they have a kid, they have to drop out of college. And it's like, well, no. So they're going to like finish their education. That's the first thing. Second group is like young women who are like not able to actually afford a kid. They're not married, right? It was an accident. The pregnancy was not planned. And if they have a child, it like screws up their whole fucking life plan, right? So that's the second group, so that's the main group of women. And then, there's also women who can't afford it. They just simply like, they're working like three jobs and shit just to stay alive, and they can't afford to have a kid, right? And rather than go through the 9 months of like, having it and then giving it up for adoption, which it can be extremely expensive to have a child, especially if you're just going to give it up for adoption. That's fine, right? But who's going to pay for it? It can cost you thousands upon thousands of dollars. Like I remember when my niece was born, right? And this was fucking 15 years ago. My niece is like 15 now. It's crazy. It cost my brother $20,000. That's how much it was for when my niece was born, right? And they had to actually like because the insurance wasn't going to cover it. And so they had to basically lie and say that, my brother and his wife, that they weren't married at the time in order to get the insurance to fucking pay for their portion. And even with the insurance coverage, it was $20,000, right? Yeah, I know. You would think like, oh, you have health insurance, it would pay for your birth, right? No. No, it doesn't, because his health insurance wasn't good enough, and so they had to like lie so that his wife could get it covered under her like mother's insurance and shit. It's all fucked up in this country. So it's like, you want people to like have less abortions, right? Universal health care. There that will cut down on the number of abortions. If you support free, if not free, then subsidized cheap health care for people, abortions will go down. People will have money, they will be able to afford to have a child and raise the child, right? Because you got to keep in mind, it's because see, the thing is, they're working from a stereotype, the conservatives. They're thinking that this is just like part of like, liberal, evil, satanic culture to have kids and like purposely have abortions, like you're fucking sacrificing them to Satan or something, and that's bullshit. A large number of the women who get abortions would choose to have the child if they could sufficiently raise it, you know, if they had the money and the resources to actually raise a child. Of course they fucking would. Okay. So that's the first thing. Second group of women who get abortions are from let's see, it was basically women who are over 30, right, in that age group and are already married and have had at least one child, right? That's the second largest group of women who get abortions. And the reason why they get abortions is specifically for that reason as well. They cannot afford to have another child, right? And these will be women who are even in marriages, who are either like single mothers or who actually are married and just can't afford it. And it's like, because wages are so low. in this country. If wages were higher, these women would have more children, but they're not having children because it's fucking can cost like, $1 million to raise a kid over 20 years or whatever. It's fucking ridiculous how expensive it fucking is. And they simply, they already have two or three children, and if they have another one, they can't afford it. It's going to fucking, that's it. Some of these women are already working two, three jobs at a time, right? So you really want to, that's the thing. It's like, do conservatives support higher wages? No. Conservatives do not support higher wages. Do conservatives support getting free or subsidized health care? No. You would think that if they actually cared about abortion, these would be the things they would support, but they don't support these things, right? They simply support you forcing you to have, a child because it's not really about the little children. It's really about controlling women's sexuality. That's what opposition to abortion actually is, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. It may surprise you all to know that teenagers actually do not get very many abortions. Women aged 18 to 19 get 8% of the abortions. 15 to 17 get 3%, right? Below the age of 15 get 0.2%. So this other sort of like straw man stereotype that like teenagers and shit are just getting abortion after abortion over and over because, kids are like super horny nowadays and it's like hookup culture and all this other baloney. That's also bullshit as well. Children, teenagers specifically, do not get the majority of abortions. That doesn't even add up to like 15%, right? You know, 8 plus 3 is what, 11 plus 0.2, 11.2. It's like it's not even, you know, barely even like mentionable how little that actually happens. So what is that telling you? Right? That's telling you that kids are having, more responsible, right? It's not like kids don't have sex anymore. Minors don't have sex because they totally do. It means they're doing it more responsibly and also choosing to not have abortions. So, you know, I would chalk it up more to success. I would chalk that up to a success in getting contraceptives, because you can go into any school in, like, say, California, for example, get free condoms. They provide those for free because they want to cut down on teenage pregnancy, right? Because teenage pregnancy is bad because if a kid gets pregnant, she drops out of school. That's the main thing that happens. They don't want kids dropping out of school, so they provide free condoms, right? That's been a thing for 30 fucking years. Shit, they had free condoms in school when I was in high school, right? Long time ago. That's a success. That's how, you can reduce the number of abortions, the number of teenage pregnancies and stuff like that by not imposing your will on people, but rather, encouraging them to make responsible choices. When that didn't happen? Back in the day when it was abstinence only education. That's what it was like back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Abstinence only. They were only allowed to talk about you should not have sex. Well, yeah, that fucking worked. Look at the number of teenage pregnancies back then, compare them to today. It was way higher back in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s than it is now. It was way higher, right? And on a per capita basis. Okay. And that's what would happen. Girls would get pregnant because they didn't know, because there was no sex ed back then, right? So they didn't understand that you couldn't just pull out or whatever. They didn't understand that you couldn't just like, do some fucking mumbo jumbo and not get pregnant, right? They didn't understand how to responsibly prevent a pregnancy, right? By using things like condoms and contraceptives and whatever, right? And what would you do back then? Abortion was illegal back then, so you had two choices. You either got married right? Or the kid like went off to a fucking covenant somewhere or halfway home or whatever and ended up dropping out of school. Kind of blows me away that that's what the conservative Christians want us to go back to. They want us to go back to children dropping out of school and like being sent off to like, halfway homes and shit like that to have their baby in secret. That kind of thing. They want us to, because that's what their basic, that's kind of what the entire plan is. If you guys haven't really noticed, the whole plan is just to bring back that like, you know, bring back all of the stigmas that we spent the last 40 years eliminating in this country around abortion, around sexuality in in general. It's essentially just to kind of undo the sexual revolution, you know. That's really what the conservative Christian plan is because it's all about control. That's what it really is. Anyway, it might also interest you guys to know that abortion has been decreasing for the last 40 years for all age groups. So regardless of your age group, there are less abortions now than there were 30 years ago, than there were 40 years ago in the 80s, right? It's gone way down. And haven't really seen much in the way of theories as to why that's a thing. I think it's a combination of availability of contraceptives, um, also, sufficient sexual education. I think that's a contributor to it, you know, for sure. And just sort of like, kids are informed nowadays in the way that they weren't informed back then. And I think it's a bad idea to take that away, right? Kind of also shows that it's a problem that's sort of going away on its own, but the conservatives still want to outlaw it. It's like, well, if you would just, maybe figure out why it's reduced, why it's going down by itself, and maybe hasten along those reasons, we wouldn't have to actually like have laws against it. We wouldn't have to throw women in prison and stuff like that. Maybe they should attack the root causes of the problem, things like poverty, stuff like that. But no, we don't have time for rational decisions, right, folks? Anyway, long story short, it's not out of convenience, right? It's not due to, slutty women with loose morals who just want to live in the moment for themselves and don't care about any consequences in the future. It's not about women just using abortion as a substitution for contraception. That is simply not the case. The data does not draw that out. Another interesting factoid that I uncovered before we move on about this, we talked about last time how the majority of women who get abortions are Christians, right? Because they are. That was the thing that we talked about last time, about what was it? More than 50% are actually Christians. May come to no surprise that 94% of abortion patients are heterosexual and straight, while 4% said they were bisexual, 0.3% identified as homosexual, right? And 1% identified as something else. So that may come to some, a little bit of surprise there because usually the right wing likes to bundle abortion in with the gay agenda, right? Turns out gay people don't really get abortions, huh? Hmm, maybe it's because they don't really have straight sex, right? Kind of also surprised me that actually some women who do identify as homosexual do get abortions. And it's like, well, how did they get pregnant in the first place? Some of that might be due to the R word, might be due to rape. That makes perfect sense to me, you know. It also might be due to experimentation, stuff like that. But kind of seems like, that's most likely women who were impregnated without their consent, which is another thing that the conservatives and the Christians don't give a shit about. They don't care if a person was raped. That doesn't seem to be something that matters to them so much. A lot of the laws that we've seen passed recently don't make any exceptions for rape or incest. Particular Oklahoma's law and also Alabama's abortion law and then Mississippi's abortion law that is also on the books now or been proposed, sorry. I don't think it's been passed just yet. You know, we talked a little bit about this last time. It's because they think that little baby fetus is a gift from God. And, God just couldn't find a nicer way to give it to you. He couldn't just like beam it into your uterus like in Star Trek or something. He couldn't use his holy power just to make you, to talk to you and be like, hey, I want you to have a kid. What do you say? Get your permission. He had to cause someone to force it upon you. Yep, sure does sound like divine intervention there, doesn't it, huh? Anyway, let's move on a little bit. Another thing, one last little bit of this comment here. It just means you go to another state to get your abortion. Yeah, like I said, going to another state to get your abortion, doesn't really fly. That doesn't mean that you still have the right. Because first off, what that's going to do is it's going to prevent the women who get abortions, who need abortions the most. The women who get the most abortions, remember, are the women who cannot afford to have children, right? Well, if you can't afford to have children, then what makes you think that you can just jump on a plane and fly to California to get an abortion, right? Because that's what'll end up happening. Because remember, when this draft passes next month or whatever, and abortion and Roe v. Wade is overturned, that's what it's going to take in order for some women in this country to actually be able to get abortions. They will have to travel not just to another state, but halfway around the country in order to do so. So I want to show you guys something. This here's a map. Let me just scroll down here. Let me see. Let me just make sure that I've got this on the right thing. This is an abortion map. These are the states that when Roe v. Wade is overturned, let me just make that a little bit bigger. These are the states that will instantly ban abortion. All of these red states here, abortion will be gone immediately. They have what are called trigger laws, right? And these trigger laws basically, the minute Roe v. Wade is over, no more abortions in any of these states. So it might be fine if you live in, let's say, Oklahoma, you can just travel up to Colorado here. Or if you live in Texas, you can go to Colorado. If you live in New Mexico, you can go to Nevada or California. What if you live way over here in, what is this, Louisiana over here? Or Mississippi right here? Or this is Louisiana, that's Mississippi. This is, Arkansas, I think. Or whatever. What if you live down here in the deep south, right? You will have to travel hundreds upon hundreds of miles to the nearest abortion clinic, right? You could go to Florida, but it's restricted in Florida. So if you're early enough, maybe you'll be able to get to Florida, maybe not. Chances are you're going to have to go up here someplace, right? Well, who do you know that works minimum wage, who cannot afford to have children, that can just jump in a car, take 2 weeks off, and, either drive or fly to another state in order to get a medical procedure? How many people do you know that can do that? Not very many, I would guess, right? Not very many at all. And that's the point. The point is, it's not just you can just jump into another, go to another state and get it, right? It's that you will have to go hundreds upon hundreds of miles. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen, right? What's going to happen is that the women won't do that. They will either be forced to have the kid or they're going to get the abortion illegally. So that's the thing that conservatives don't understand, is that it won't just mean that suddenly end of abortion. Now, like, all the little baby fetuses are saved. No, that's not what's going to happen, right? The women will instead get, back alley abortions, illegal abortions, right? Underground abortions that are done in ways that are not safe. And this, was a major fucking problem back in the day. That happened a lot, I'm not going to get too much into this. If you want to research, what all this was, there's a million resources out there on the web. Just search for, back alley abortion stories, and you'll find literally thousands upon thousands of articles and books written all about how life was back then and how, like, it was unsafe, how you could not only potentially go to jail if somebody found out that you got one, but you could actually die during the procedure, right? But this didn't stop women from getting them because it's like, you can't afford to have that kid. You don't have a choice, right? What happens if the reason why you can't afford to have that kid is because you could like lose your job, you know? Conservatives don't really support maternity leave either, do they? No. Do they support protections for pregnant women in the workplace? No. Right? So it's like, so they don't want to make it easy for you to have a kid. They don't want to make it so that you can afford to have a kid. They don't want to protect you when you have to take time off to have your kid. You can't just like go have a baby and then go back to fucking work at like, at fucking like Del Taco the next day and shit. Take some time to recover from that, right? It's a major medical procedure. So, women to this day die during birth. Birth is not like, it's not like this like totally safe like thing that anybody can just do while they're like in a rice paddy and shit working. Just give birth and then just keep on working. No, it doesn't work like that. You need time to recover. And then also, if you want them to keep the baby, well, you also need time to like bond with your kid, right? It's expensive, right? And besides the fact that it fucking costs like, tens of thousands of dollars to have a kid, then what are you going to do when you have to work the next day? You can't just leave it at home. It's not like a dog. You can't just like, you know, put a bowl of food there and just leave the kid alone for 8 hours and then come back and expect it to be alive. It's like, no, you have to hire babysitters and shit like that. You have to hire, well, if you can't afford to have the fucking kid in the first place, what makes you think you're going to be able to pay somebody $20 an hour to fucking babysit your kid? And that's how much it costs nowadays. It's like the days of where you could just get like a 13-year-old, the 13-year-old girl down the street and pay her $5 a day to watch your kid. That's over with. That's gone. Okay. Your babysitters are like fucking $20 an hour now, right? Your your daycare centers are like $1,000 a month. Like my brother was paying for, and this was 10 years ago when his kid is a teenager now, so she doesn't need daycare centers anymore. But back when she was like an infant and shit, when she was like a toddler, daycare was $900 a month, right? To drop a kid off for a few hours. That's what it was. That's what daycare is. Daycare is you drop a kid off for a few hours and they make sure the kid doesn't die. And then maybe they get like a juice box, right? And get to like play with some toys and shit. $900 a month for that. That's like rent for some people, you know? In some places in this country, you can rent an apartment for $900 a month. That's what, you know, are the conservatives making that any fucking easier? No, right? Are they doing anything to provide daycare centers for children to make daycare easier, right? Here's the thing they could do that fits with conservative ideology. This fits. Here you go. This is an American GOP, dyed in the wool Republican conservative thing, stance on daycare, healthcare for children, right? Make the amount of money you pay for daycare deductible from your taxes. Bam. Perfect. Right there. Right. Anyone out there who's a Republican should not have any like ideological objection to what I just suggested. Okay. They like People having kids, they don't like abortion, right? They don't like taxes. So why not allow families who pay for daycare to take it off of their taxes? I guarantee you, suggest that to any conservative politician, they will shoot that down. Guarantee you. Suggest that to any conservative talking head. Go to Ben Shapiro, talk to him about that. He will shoot that shit down, right? Fucking bullshit. We spent like the first half hour just talking about the first comment here. I've got at least three or four. So let's move on. Comment number 2. Moving on here. Where's my mouse? Okay, well, how come I cannot see my mouse? There it is. Comment number 2. So I responded. Let's move that down some about this, right? The way I responded to him was that, well, all of the objections to abortion come from religious grounds because they do. And his response is this: I don't believe all of the arguments levied against abortion are based on religion. For example, an abortion would mean that you are denying that person's bodily autonomy, right? Well, here's the thing about that, right? What I said is true. The only reason anyone objects to abortion is because of religious reasons, right? Currently out there in the GOP, if you were to take a poll of every Republican and Democrat politician who objects to abortion, because, there are Democratic politicians who are anti abortion. Joe Manchin, for example, is anti abortion. Joe Manchin is the reason why we do not have a federal law that protects abortions. He just used his power in Congress to destroy that. So it's not a red-blue divide. It's a conservative, it's a culture divide between conservatives and progressives and liberals, right? Keep that in mind. It's not, political parties are not the same thing as political ideologies. There are such thing as conservative Democrats. There are liberal Republicans. It just so happens that there are no liberal Republicans right now in the Senate, but there are plenty of conservative Democrats. Joe Manchin is one of those, and that's why, abortion is about to be outlawed because the Democratic Party has too many fucking conservatives in it, right? Anyway, but if you were to go to any of those people, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Louis Gohmert, do you think any of them would cite a non-religious reason for wanting to outlaw abortion? Somehow, I don't think so. It just so happens, I mean, unless you think it's a coincidence that all of the people who are anti-abortion just also happen to be, you know, Christian ministries that rake in millions upon millions of dollars in their efforts to, stop abortion. Unless you just think that's a coincidence. Places like Focus on the Family, for example, the Eagle Forum, those kinds of things. All of the conservative political action groups out there, if you think that they're not anti-abortion because they are appealing to the religious conservative component, I got a bridge to sell you. Sorry, but that's what it is, right? Abortion is in this country most definitely, and purely, people object to it on religious grounds, you know, and it's because it doesn't really make sense from any other, the objection to it from any other angle doesn't really make sense. Not really, you know, it's murder. Okay, well, the state murders people all the time, right? Police murder people, right? We kill people in wars, right? We kill people like, even capital punishment is another way that we kill people. So, no, we kill people all the fucking time in this country officially, right? We even kill people through our inaction. It's like, well, if you object to people dying, then what about pollution, right? How come conservatives don't give a shit about the environment? You know, thousands upon thousands of people in this country die because of complications because of pollution, things like cancer, you know, that they get through polluted water, something like that, right? Things like emphysema, that kind of thing, right? And then also, let's not forget, we just had fucking we just passed a million COVID deaths. Conservatives don't seem to give a shit about any of those people, right? I mean, they were doing everything they fucking could to like stop us from like trying to control the pandemic. So don't give me this shit that you care about life or you care about murder. It's like it's murder, yeah. It's murder when it's like a woman going to an abortion clinic, but not murder when like we kill a pregnant woman with a fucking drone strike. Yeah, get the fuck out of here. Right? That's bullshit. It doesn't make any sense. You know, it only makes sense when you approach it from the religious standpoint. God told us not to kill babies. Okay, that makes sense. Because then that also allows for all of the other bullshit. Well, God thinks it's okay to kill everybody else, just not babies, right? You know, let's be a little ideological consistent here, right? Um, Also keep in mind, none of these people I just mentioned, none of them give a fuck about bodily autonomy, right? Zero. Nobody cares about bodily autonomy, like especially from the Republican conservative side. None of those people give a fuck about bodily autonomy, right? In the draft that just got published, Alito doesn't say anything about bodily autonomy at all. He doesn't say that you're taking away the rights of the fetus, blah, 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 blah. He fucking quoted a guy from the fucking 15th century that we just mentioned. Sorry, 16th century, right? We mentioned him earlier in the stream. Quotes a guy named, I got it written down here, Sir Matthew Hale, who was a 17th century jurist. Sir Matthew Hale wrote a book called The History of the Pleas of the Crown, where he lays out the case for marital rape. This is what Sir Matthew Hale says, right? For the husband cannot be guilty of a rape committed by himself upon his lawful wife, for by their mutual matrimonial consent and contract the wife hath given up herself in this kind unto her husband, which she cannot retract. Basically saying if you were married, then the woman has to obey her husband anytime that he wants to get some, no matter what shape she's in or how she feels like it too fucking bad, that contract says she has to put out. And if he forces her, that's not rape, according to the person Samuel Alito quoted in his draft. You know, I would like to see like what fucking legal basis that has. Like, aren't like judges and stuff just supposed to like quote other laws and that kind of thing? Like, why is this dude like quoting some shit from like the fucking 16th century, number one? And that just kind of goes to show like how far he had to dig in order to find something that like, you know, actually lined up. Like, because that's the thing, right? Samuel Alito was not allowed to quote any religious, scriptures or anything in his decision, right? In his draft decision, because that's unconstitutional. It is unconstitutional to pass a law based on a religious litmus test. That's unconstitutional, and that would get struck down by the Supreme Court. His own Supreme Court would overturn that. So he had to come up with some other fucking reason to like, say abortion's bad. Couldn't find any. Had to like go back fucking 400 years and shit in order to find something. That kind of shows you just how like how weak the religious grounds are for the secular argument against abortion. Kind of shows you that there fucking is no secular argument against abortion, doesn't it? Anyway, but since we're talking about bodily autonomy, what about the mother's bodily autonomy? Because see, here's the thing: fetuses do not have rights because a fetus is not a person, right? So, in every state in this country now, well, formally, up until about, a month ago, it was legal to get an abortion because the woman's life was in danger, right? As one of the reasons. You know, if the mother's life is in danger, she has a right to preserve her own life, right? And her bodily autonomy overrides the bodily autonomy of the fetus because a fetus is not yet born. Fetus is not an actual person. Fetus doesn't have a name, doesn't have a social security number, can't own anything, right? Does not have rights. You can't arrest a fetus for a crime. What are you going to do? Oh, you have the right to remain silent. That's bullshit, right? Not going to work like that. Fetus, doesn't have a right to free speech. Fetus can't even talk, right? Children in general in this country do not have a full set of rights. Even after they're born, children don't really have the same rights as adults. And that's just a given, you know. Kids don't really have a right to like work or own property. Not really. If you're under 18 and you own something, your parents can just take it. Gone. What are you going to do? Sue your parents? They'll laugh you out of court. You don't have that right. You don't have a right to own anything, right to property as a minor. No. That's why you get all these stories about child actors and shit who like go off and make millions of dollars and then their parents fucking blow it all and there's nothing they can do about it. This is like the whole thing with Britney Spears, how she was like, in conservatorship and all this other thing because, she was like a minor and shit and her fucking father like took all her money and fucked her up and then like when she got old enough to try to get out of it has her fucking declared insane and all this other thing so that he could keep fucking taking her money, shit like that. There are stories like that all over the place, children being exploited, child actors and stuff because they don't have any rights. You're a child, you can't sign a contract, your parents signs it for you, right? You don't have like do you know you can, in some states in this country, meet people that you don't even know, sign your child over to them, and then that's it. You just sign some paperwork saying this kid, you are now this kid's legal guardian. You can essentially do that, and that's 100% legal. You don't need to vet them at all. You don't have to like do any paperwork. I know in some states in this country, like California, that's not exactly, there's steps that you got to go through. Other states, it's as simple as signing a piece of paper. They just show up, and there was actually a problem with this not that long ago. There were like Yahoo groups and stuff, and there's still one that operates on Facebook about people who basically rehome children the same way that you would rehome a cat or a dog. And that's how they treat it, right? Because when you're a kid, you don't actually have rights. I mean, not really. So this is, so let's be consistent. Why don't we give minors the full rights of citizenship? Let's give them the right to vote. Nope. You won't. You don't agree to that, right? Why? Because they're kids. Because they're kids, they don't actually have rights. Well, that kind of goes more when you're a fetus. When you're not even born yet, you know, you can't exactly kill someone who's not actually born. It's not really murder. All you're really doing is preventing them from developing into a full human being, right? And if you would look, Roe versus Wade actually like had provisions for that, right? If read the decision, Roe versus Wade. It's actually very well thought out. It lays out when you can and can't get abortions, right? And even the subsequent decision, which was the Planned Parenthood decision in 1989, I can't remember the exact name of it. I've got it written down here. It was, let me see, blah, 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 Planned Parenthood versus Casey. That is actually a pretty good decision too, if you read that out. Basically says, okay, it's based on it's not based on the trimesters anymore, but it's based on the viability of the fetus. And that makes perfect sense to me. I think most people would agree that if a fetus can survive outside of the mother, then you can put reasonable restrictions on abortion, right? Things like late term abortions, for example, which is already illegal everywhere, pretty much everywhere in the country. Late term abortions are basically when, the kid is old enough to live, 6, 7, 8 months old or something. And they're basically just like, aborting it before it's born when they could induce like an early, like premature birth or something. That is outlawed pretty much everywhere in the nation now. I think most people don't object to that. Even people who are pro-life or pro-choice, excuse me. You know, People who are pro-abortions would. I think if you were to ask the majority of them, even like abortion activists, they would say, yeah, late-term abortions, ban those, right? It's just when you want to ban all of it because you're like a fascist who wants to fucking impose your will on everybody and control women. That's when we all have a problem, right? It's like, the thing is, the 90% of what these people want is already either law or not a problem, and they just got to push it even further because it's all about control. It's all about control and making money. Anyway, moving on. Let's move down to the next comment here because I want to get through some of these and then talk to some questions, and then we're gonna fucking rag on Ben Shapiro for like the remaining hour. Next comment here. I responded to this comment about bodily autonomy. I said that if conservatives cared about bodily autonomy, they would support trans rights, and they don't. So here's the response I got here. Trans rights are following along with someone's world without regards to reality. Genetics biology says one is male through your DNA, physicality, sex, not just because you say you are. Bodily autonomy is choosing what to do with your own body, correct? That concept bumps with mask mandates and vaccine mandates. Also, at the risk of the unborn, those rights to bodily autonomy are also not granted. Right. So, here's the thing, okay? What exactly is trans rights, right? What is being trans? It's choosing to do what you want to do with your body. That is the definition of what transitioning actually is, right? That is what transitioning is. If you're transitioning your gender from one to another, right? Along with that transition comes physical changes to your body, right? You have a right to do what you want with your own body. That is the very definition of bodily autonomy, right? So, a law that says you're not allowed to do something with your body, like change the way you express your gender, is a law that infringes upon bodily autonomy. So, hence, transgender rights are rights that do with bodily autonomy, right? If you want to get surgery so that you present in a certain way, if you want to take hormones that you present in a certain way, if you want to just dress or grow your hair out or something like that, or shave your beard or whatever, these are all things that you do with your body, right? In order to present yourself to appear, more aligned with the gender that you feel inside, right? This is the very definition of bodily autonomy. If there's a law that says you're not allowed to do those things, that law is infringing upon your bodily autonomy. That's just the definition of words there. So it's not, it's not just some made up bullshit that people, are trying to force upon you, right? It is how they want to present themselves and things they want to do to their body, right? I'm pretty sure if we were to pass a law saying no one is allowed to get, let's say, penis enlargement surgery. Let's say you wanted to do that. Let's say you just wanted to get those extra 3 inches so that you could be like in the double digits or whatever, right? Because that's totally what everyone who gets penis enlargement surgery actually does it for. That's totally the reason. let's say you wanted to do that, you know. Or here you go. Let's say penis reduction surgery. Let's just say, my dick is just too big. It's fucking so big I just can't buy pants anymore. I want to get surgery to get this, this monster reduced, I take it out, women scream in horror, they run away. It's not my fault. It's like, 9 pounds, 7 inches and shit. I gotta. Anyway, right. And let's say a state like, a liberal state like California said, nope, you are not allowed to get surgery on your penis. Sorry. This is, our religion says all men have to have supermassive giant dicks. Right. Would you say that this is infringing upon your bodily autonomy? Hmm? I would say so. Let's say whatever reason. See, that's the thing, right? It doesn't matter what the reason is. It doesn't matter if you want to get breast reduction surgery, as some women like to do because they just have, you know, mammary glands that are just too large and unwieldy. It doesn't matter if you want to get your breasts removed because they don't match with how you feel inside. You don't want them anymore because you're not a woman, right? It shouldn't matter. What matters is that there are laws saying you are not allowed to do these things depending on who you are, where you live, and how old you are, right? Here's the thing about this, okay? We had a whole stream about this about a month ago, so I won't spend too much time on it. But the most of the objections to these types of things are have to do with minors, children, and in fact, 1911 greater than all even says that himself later on in a couple of comments that we'll come across, right? And you know, the thing about it is that minors don't actually get surgery. Like it's not really a thing that happens. I mean, I'm sure you'll find some instances of it happening here or there. It's not really a thing. The same way that minors don't get, like, let's say, teenage girls don't usually get breast enhancements, right? You don't usually see or liposuction shit like that. You don't usually see like teenage trans kids getting top or bottom surgery. That's usually not a thing that happens. What does happen is that they may get things like hormones or puberty blockers, right? Well, here's the thing about that, especially the puberty blockers, is that if you were to say change your mind later, as teenagers are often do, and decide this is something that you don't want to go through with, you simply stop taking the medication. You stop taking the hormones, you stop taking the puberty blockers. Your body will then acclimate back to how it was without that medicine, and you will begin to express your gender the same as your birth gender, right? And no harm, no foul. Okay. These are things that are accepted by the greater scientific community. They're very low risk, you know. And here's the thing, I understand the objection to it because it kind of sounds fishy, doesn't it? But then if you actually read about it, find out that they actually are low risk. It's not like these things cause cancer or any shit like that. It's not like they cause weird growth things where your arms become too fucking long or something like that. No. It there's very low risk of these things happening, you know. And what's the worst that could happen? No, you might need to take some extra testosterone or something later on. It's like, no, it's a very low risk. And it's like, why would you deny that to somebody, you know? Someone who's like, let's say someone who's 16 years old. Why would you deny them the ability to express themselves, their gender, and their sexuality the way they want when it's a process that's completely reversible, you know? The only reason you would do so is because your religion tells you to. That's really it. You can't think about it, all the other arguments against it, from especially like the conservative libertarian stance, all the other arguments against it don't really make sense. Oh, you're too young. Oh, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Well, it's fucking reversible, the shit, right? I'll even grant, I'll grant this. I will make a concession and say, yes, I don't think children who are under the age of 18 should be allowed to get surgery, bottom or top surgery. I'll even grant that, right? Because surgery is permanent. And at the very least, you should be a legal adult before you get that kind of surgery. And you know what? I would say that cosmetic surgery falls under that as well. Someone wants to get a nose job, for example, you should have to be 18. Somebody wants to get breast implants, you should have to be 18, right? Same way that if you want to get a tattoo, you have to be 18. Body modification, shit like that. We don't let minors do stuff like that either because you're a minor. You make dumb decisions and, if we let minors get tattoos, they'll cover their whole fucking bodies with them. Right? And and it's specifically for that reason because you're a kid. You're a kid and you're figuring things out. You may change your mind. You may decide, hey, maybe I'm not actually trans. Maybe I'm intersex instead. Maybe I'm something else. Maybe I'm not exactly a trans person, but I'm still, queer or something. Or, maybe I like expressing myself as a man, you know, whatever. These are all things that people don't automatically always have figured out. I think I got disconnected there for a second there, folks. Sorry about that. I am still streaming, right? Please tell me I'm still streaming. Shit. Okay. Yeah, I think I did cut out there for a second there, Lewis. Sorry about that. It says I have excellent fucking connection, so I don't know. Anyway, let's move on. I did want to talk a little bit about this second comment here. Bodily autonomy is choosing to do with your own body. Correct. That concept bumps with mask mandates and vaccine mandates. So I really like how it is, excuse me, somehow against your bodily autonomy to ask someone to wear a mask or to get a vaccine to prevent a disease, but not against bodily autonomy to outlaw medical procedures for how someone wants to express their gender. That really kind of just blows me away because this is not the first time I've heard that, right? Now, it may surprise you all out there to know we recently passed 1 million COVID deaths officially. In real life, we probably passed 1 million COVID deaths a long time ago, right? And I just wanted to do a little digging on this. So, first off, anybody out there who is upset at that, the fact that we have 1 million people dead from COVID. And if you think you're going to, looking for someone to blame, please remember that, you know, you can't exactly blame Joe Biden for this because Joe Biden had some vaccine and mask mandates that got struck down. I don't know if you guys remember that, right? So if you're mad that 1 million people are dead now, you should really be talking to the Republicans. You know, they're the ones that, we had a vaccine mandate that said if you have a business with more than 100 people in it, then they have to be vaccinated or they got to get tested weekly. Struck down by a conservative judge. You know, there was just recently a court case that was struck down, and it struck down the mask mandate on public transportation. You know, subways, airplanes, stuff like that, right? That was actually struck down by a judge named Catherine Kimball Malizi, who, according to the American Bar Association, is unqualified to be a judge. And she was appointed by Donald Trump, of course, and the person who has insufficient experience, according to the American Bar Association, in the actual courtroom, never actually tried a case, apparently. You know, like she worked as like a legal clerk and shit like that. Like she never actually like tried a case to completion, right? So on her own as a lawyer or something, and then like she only had 8 years experience as a lawyer, and usually they recommend 12 years, stuff like that. She's now a permanent judge forever who gets to make decisions like people should not be required to wear masks when they're enclosed inside of an airplane for hours and hours and hours. Should not surprise any of you to know that transmissions of the Rona among flight attendants and airplane staff is up by 50% since that happened. So there you go, folks. Masks work, you know. One other thing I want to kind of point out here, because I think it's relevant. Let's open this up. This is the New York Times. Corona, and I always like looking at maps and stuff. Oh my God. Fuck you. Oh, they're not going to let me. Oh my God. You suck, New York Times. God damn it. You know what? It's because I saw it yesterday and it was like free. And now I guess I used up my free 1 month fucking you know, free article there. But anyway, you know what? I'll just put that down in the chat for you guys. I don't know. Maybe some of you people actually have um, accounts for the New York Times there. Anyway, I wanted to show you that because it showed an interactive map, right? Basically, on the map that's on that link that I'm not allowed to open because the New York Times is like, you know, capitalist and shit, basically shows that you are more likely to get sick from the Rona and more likely to die in it the redder your state is. And it wasn't always like that in the beginning. If you remember, the actual outbreaks were in New York and California and stuff like that. But time has passed. So currently, right now, for example, California has roughly 90,000 deaths from the Rona, right? Which is a lot. But California also has 40 million people in their population and have had about 9 million cases, right? So, you know, you go, wow, that's a lot of cases. That's 1 in 4, right? Well, if you look around, Texas, for example, has almost the exact same amount of deaths as California, right? 88,493 deaths from Texas, right? Problem is, Texas has 10 million less people, so the per capita is actually higher. You're more likely to catch the Rona and die from it when you live in Texas than you are in California. Same with Alabama. Alabama has about 20,000 deaths, right? They had 1.3 million cases. Alabama has less than 5 million people, right? And 5 million people, like it's roughly 4.8 million people, right? So, yeah, not that much different than California, you know, about 1 in 4, right? It's the same, right? Um, you know, Florida had 75,000 deaths, 74,178 actual deaths, right? 6 million cases, right? But they only have 21 million people that live there. Your per capita is higher. Why is that? Why is it? Why is it that less people live in red states, but the actual like death rate per capita is actually higher than it is in the blue states, in the populous blue states? You know, I mean, is it what? More people just what? I don't know. I mean, I would think that people just don't take it seriously there. People don't wear masks, right? When they don't wear masks, they don't get vaccinated. Too bad that that New York Times article actually had another map that showed vaccination rates, where you could see where around the country most people are vaccinated, right? Just so happens that the places, you know, the big evil tree hugging liberal states are the states where more people are vaccinated, get less cases, you know. I mean, kind of sounds like a pretty good argument to say, you know, just looking at the data like that, pretty good evidence that vaccines and masks actually work, right? But anyway, we were talking more about bodily autonomy, you know, bodily autonomy. Why is it wrong to ask someone to wear a mask or get a vaccine, but not wrong to prevent someone from getting hormones, right? It's because hormones don't actually kill other people. See, when you get hormones or when you get surgery, something like that, you're not, that's not something that affects someone else, right? If you don't wear a mask, if you don't get vaccinated, and you have a deadly disease, you are putting other people in danger, right? That's where the line gets drawn, in my opinion. You know, if for some reason hormones actually killed other people, like if you took hormones and that somehow caused somebody else to like die, I would be against them. But that's not the case. You can't take your puberty blockers or your hormones and spread a deadly disease with them. Right? It's just not, doesn't make any sense. So it's like, no, we do have a right to protect people, right? We do have a right to take public health measures in order to prevent people from catching an easily controlled disease, right? And that's what the evidence shows. The evidence shows that when you actually take these public health measures, less people die. You're more likely to, not catch the disease in the first place, right? And that's just what it shows. If it wasn't, sorry, but the same amount of people died in Texas than in California. One of those states had mask mandates, the other one didn't. Kind of plain as day to me, right? Anyway, moving on here. Couple more. I think this was, whoa, all right, this was the big one that I wanted to talk about. So let me just move all this stuff down. We already looked at that map there. Okay, bodily integrity. This is where we start complaining about bodily integrity, all that other stuff, right? The inviolability of the physical body and emphasizes the importance of personal autonomy, self-ownership, and self-determination of human beings over their own bodies. In the field of human rights, violation of the bodily integrity of another is regarded as an unethical infringement, intrusive, and possibly criminal. So I'm not sure exactly what he meant to convey by giving me this definition, because this definition, if you take that definition, then these laws against trans rights and laws against abortion definitely fall within that definition, do they not? You know, self ownership, self determination of human beings over their own bodies. You own your own body. It's up to you what you want to do with it. It's up to you if you want to get surgery. It's up to you on how you want to express your gender, if you want to take hormones, something like that. And according to this definition, any law that says you're not allowed to do those things is violating your bodily autonomy, is it not? So, sorry 1911, I don't know what you were trying to say there, but that's kind of a self-own. If you were trying to like imply that this definition meant trans rights didn't fall under that definition, then that was not communicated. That's not what I got from this, right? Second point, I don't care if you get hormones or surgery as an adult, the problem deals with minors. Compelling language in regards to the trans thing. So we already talked about minors and, my stance on them. No need to repeat that. The the compelling language thing though, I really wasn't sure what you were talking about. Compelling language. Like who is compelling anyone to say anything, right? And I just wanted to, because I know you're probably going to see this stream eventually, 1911, if you're not watching right now. Did you mean, for example, by compelling language, did you mean the whole like forcing someone to use their personal pronouns thing? I think that's what he's talking about here. Forcing people to use their personal pronouns, right? So that is a requirement, a law, like nowhere in the country. Nowhere in the country is there a law that says you have to use someone's personal pronouns. It's just mainly a thing that people do to be nice to each other, right? Some people will list it on their Instagrams or whatever, right? There's some people like in, colleges or whatever that will ask you to do it. If you don't do it, it's not like you get fired. It's not like you fucking go to prison. It's not like you fucking get kicked out of school if you like misgender someone, especially if it's an accident, because it can happen all the time. The way that kids dress nowadays, you have no idea what they're presenting as sometimes, especially when it comes to, gender fluid people, stuff like that. It's like you may misgender someone and be completely, innocent about it and like, oh, it was a mistake, right? The problem comes when you harass someone over it. It's when someone explains to you how they want to be addressed and then you purposely ignore it and harass them over their choice. That's where that's where it comes in. It's not exactly compelling language unless you can say not harassing someone is compelling language. Kind of the same way that most businesses and schools and things like that don't like you going around saying racial slurs, right? You can't just like use the N word, like say if you want to keep your job, like in a professional setting, right? You'll get fired for that, right? Schools will, if you went around being a total big ass fucking racist and shit, you know, you will get reprimanded for that. That's the same thing. So if you're trying to say that that's compelling speech, not being a bigot, not harassing people by purposely misgendering them, if you're saying that's compelling speech, then I would have to counter saying that, well, there already is compelling speech out there. And this just is the same, it fits in the same category as not using racial slurs, as not using profanity in some cases, stuff like that. But you'll notice there are no laws against any of that. There's no law that throws you in jail for using the N word, right? The same way that there's no law that will throw you in jail for misgendering someone by using a incorrect pronoun. You will not go to prison for that. And that doesn't exist here. That was a thing that that fucking Muppet dude, fucking Jordan Peterson guy sounds like Kermit the Frog. That's how he got famous. Jordan Peterson got famous by protesting one of a law in Canada, which was called I've got it here. It was what was the fucking Canada's fucking law? Uh, Something like it was like Senate Bill 2 or some shit like that, right? And it was basically like, yeah, Jordan Peterson. There was some law that what it was doing is it was adding trans rights to Canada's like definition of human rights. And there's a provision in there that is like an anti harassment, anti bigotry position, basically saying that, if you are harassing someone, then you can like get fined, right? And go to jail and shit. Because, in Canada, that's against the law. You're not allowed to fucking harass people. You're not allowed to like, you know, like in a rate, like use racist shit to like harass people. You're not allowed to do that, right? And that would fall under that definition. What I just said. If you repeatedly dead named someone, if you repeatedly like misgendered them on purpose as part of a fucking harassment campaign, then yes, you could actually be fined and go to jail. And that's what Jordan Peterson like, that's how he got his following was based on that little tidbit of bigotry. So if that's what you're talking about, if you're trying to say that, not harassing someone is compelling speech, then I guess I have to concede there, you know. But we do not have that law in the United States. There is no law that says you'll go to prison for even like, just misgendering someone, for not for not using their for dead naming them, shit like that. No, that is not a thing in the United States. There's nobody compelling speech anywhere, especially when it comes to the law. That's just not a thing that's happening, you know. Anyway, this last one here. As for a disease, people do have the ability to simply avoid others if they are so sensitive. Go to places where there are less people without masks. Kind of the same thing as going to another state to get an abortion, kind of sort of. And I think the same argument applies there, right? And I would just say on a personal level, fuck that shit. That's what I would say, right? No, no, I'm not going to let's say that there was a disease that all it took was wearing a mask to stop it. Nobody else wants to wear a fucking mask. I'm not going to fly to another fucking state to live just because the people around me don't want to take basic precautions. Like, that's bullshit. No, there should be a lot. In that case, pass a fucking law saying wear a goddamn mask. It's no different, in my opinion, than forcing someone to wear a seatbelt. Not different. Exact same thing, Forcing someone to wear a helmet when they're riding a motorcycle. Exact same fucking thing, right? Basic safety precautions are different than bodily autonomy, you know. Especially if it's wearing a mask, somebody could make an argument against taking a vaccine and you saying bodily autonomy there, although I think that argument's bullshit, but whatever. But wearing a mask, no, that's not even a permanent thing. It's like a safety precaution, right? And we have the right as a society in order to enforce safety precautions. So, sorry, that argument is just doesn't make any sense. Does not make any sense and does not stand up to the slightest fucking bit of scrutiny, right? Seriously, man, that's what rights are all about. See, when you have a right to something, it's not conditional, right? I have a right to not catch a fucking disease from somebody when, especially when it comes say when me executing my job or something. That's why I think the vaccine mandate that Biden wanted to pass that got struck down was perfectly fine, right? Because it's a safety precaution. But the vaccine mandate that said that everybody, if you had a business with over 100 people, then everybody had to be vaccinated. Why I think that's perfectly acceptable is because if you have to go to your job in order to live, which you do, right? Then your employer should guarantee your safety while you're at that job, right? That's why we have things like OSHA, you know, why we have safety precautions and safety standards and shit like that. Why you're not allowed to set it up so that a guy is in the middle of a fucking press or whatever. You ever see those videos of people in China working in factories and it's all super dangerous and there'll be a press that they'll be making pots and pans and shit and there'll be people sitting in the middle of the fucking press as it goes up and down and they have to bend their heads and stuff so they don't get crushed. You ever see videos like that? That's why shit like that is illegal, you know? That's why, because you should not have to take your fucking life into your hands to go to work, right? And that's what vaccine, mandates are all about. The vaccine fucking works. We know it works. It doesn't fucking cause autism or any shit like that. It's not filled with fucking, you know, weird demonic creatures and stuff that make spoons stick to your fucking face. All that stuff's bullshit, right? And if you're gonna have a shitload of people in an office, it makes perfect fucking sense to force them to take this vaccine, right? To take precautions, you know? Either that or don't have them in the office. We have that option too, right? But no, it's one or the other. It's either safe or it isn't safe, right? So you want people to be in your fucking office, you want people to work, enforce that vaccine mandate, right? Makes perfect sense to me. No different than requiring yellow tape around a bandsaw so that people don't get too close to it. No different than requiring people to wear hairnets in a restaurant so that fucking hair and boogers and shit don't get inside of your hamburger. Exact same fucking thing to me. Anyway, moving on. Let's read a couple of comments because we are at 12:38 and I want to talk about Ben Shapiro for a little bit because Ben Shapiro is an idiot. But let's read some of the comments here before we move on. Let's see, what do we got? Lusa Hedgehog. The 1911 was a gun designed in, well, 1911. Yeah, it's like a pistol or something, right? Yeah, pretty sure. Dynacat actually would have been designed in some year earlier than 1911 since it was adopted by the Army. Okay, yeah, whatever. Let's see. Dynacat, just going to another state is out of reach for many. Correct. Correct. Just even that already puts it out of, because like we said, most of the women that get abortions are poor. They're women that live below the federal poverty line. And from that map we looked at, it's like it's not just one state over. It's fucking hundreds and hundreds of miles, right? That, you either got to buy a plane ticket or you got to buy a bus ticket or something like that. And then if you're going to do that, you're going to probably going to have to get hotel rooms and all this other shit. And then besides the fact that they have to take it off of work, it's like, no, man, it becomes prohibitively expensive. And that's the whole point. The whole point is to make it prohibitively expensive like that so women won't get them. You know, complete bullshit. Let's see. Lewis the Hedgehog. I wish Alito would quote a more recent document like, oh, say, the Constitution. Exactly. Exactly. Like, why is Alito quoting some dude, like, from like fucking 1659 and shit? That same person he quoted, the Sir whatever his name was, in that same book, he supports like this guy put women to death for being witches. That's how long ago this was. This is a guy who was like burning women at the stake for being fucking like satanic witches and shit. You know, something that I'm pretty sure the majority of even conservative Christians today would say is ridiculous, superstitious bullshit, right? Although I do know for a fact that many Christians actually do believe in fucking satanic witches. Ridiculous. We did a stream about the satanic panic about 6 months ago or so. That belief is still very much around. It's like bad ideas never die, folks. They just fucking like evolve or whatever. But still, I would say the majority of even evangelical conservative Christians would think the witch burning thing is fucking ridiculous, right? But this is who this guy is going to because there's like very little support in actual secular law against, putting limits on abortion. So he's got to go back to like the fucking scraping the bottom of the barrel for this shit in order to find somebody that supports his fucking position. Let's see. We can turn this thing off here because I'm pretty much done with it. Let's make that smaller. What else we got? Let's see. Dynacat, I don't know that it follows that universal health care will reduce abortions. You can't really say people will have more money and choose to have children. I think universal health care, if it provided abortions, would well, it would reduce abortions because it removes a barrier to having children. Because healthcare in this country is extremely expensive, right? And that is a reason why women get abortions. It's one of the reasons that women get abortions is because they simply can't afford children. So if you actually did have free healthcare, including things like free natal care, stuff like that, it very well could reduce the number of abortions. It would remove that because that is a category. That is a category of women who get abortions. It's they just can't afford it. It would remove that entire category. And maybe they might choose to get an abortion for other reasons, but that would be a worry that's gone. Oh, well, I'm pregnant now. but at least I can like go to the doctor and all this other shit. You know what? Another thing that would reduce abortions, right? Maternity leave. That's another thing that would reduce abortions, right? Um, Allowing women to take time off of work to get prenatal care and actually spend time with the kid. That would reduce abortions a lot, right? Raising wages would reduce abortions a lot. Especially from the second group, the group of women who are in their 30s who get abortions and they already have families, you know, and the reason why why they're choosing to not have children is because they can't afford another kid. If they made more money, they'd be able to afford another kid. They might choose to actually keep the children and say, oh, this is a happy accident instead. These are the kinds of choices people have to make in this country because wages are so fucking low, right? Wages have not kept up with inflation since the 70s. They have not. And it's like the choice is, you know, hang on barely, like we're barely hanging on now, have another kid, and we're going to have to it's going to fuck everything up, or get an abortion and continue on with how we're living, right? These are actual real choices people really have to make. So I really do think that, yeah, like giving more access to healthcare, free healthcare, definitely would reduce abortions for sure. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm just talking out of my ass, but I think so. Um, let's see. In the 60s, they also didn't educate on how sex led to babies. They show the worst imaginable cases of the venereal diseases as inevitable results. Yeah, they did that too when I was in high school. But no, for sure, sex ed really was kind of in its infancy back then. And you saw more teen pregnancy as a result. Teen pregnancy was higher in the 60s and 70s than it is today, right? Like as a per capita, not the actual numbers. Like the actual numbers are higher because there's more people alive today. The population is twice what it was in the 60s. That's just a thing. But like the number of like say teen pregnancies is like way down, like per capita than it was in like the 60s and 70s. It was way way higher back then, you know. But yeah, the whole venereal disease thing. I mean, I don't know if they do that now, but yeah, I experienced that in the early 90s. They they took us all aside and basically just showed us pictures of every fucking venereal disease there was in order to you know, prevent us from ever you know, getting a boner ever again. And then the girls got to go off and to their own separate room and talk about lady stuff. They never told us what they talked about. I'm assuming it was all about uteruses and periods and things, right? But anyway, but yeah, that does, in all seriousness though, sex ed actually does reduce abortions. It does, proper sex ed, because you understand how it all works. You know what the risks are. A lot. If you don't have proper sexual education, you don't know what the risks to pregnancy are, and you might end up believing some stupid myth like, oh, all you got to do is use the rhythm method or something, whatever, right? You might end up believing some shit like that, and oh, it doesn't work. It doesn't count if if you pull out and you put in just the tip or something like, whatever, right? So no, when you're educated, you know what it is, and you get access to contraceptives, you have less teenage pregnancy. And I think that is a lot of the reason why it's gone down so much is probably due to that as well. I mean, that's just my own like assumption. I could be wrong, but um Ben Shapiro, yes. I am going to talk about Ben Shapiro. In fact, we're going to spend the last half hour here talking about one of his videos, which why don't we go ahead and jump into that? So I have here Ben Shapiro's incredibly bad. Let's open that up. There is some other stuff I wanted to talk about, but we'll get to
If you're
that
wondering,
later. Shut up, Ben Shapiro. Let's move this over here. Let's turn on my Let's see, go to my stream. Let's turn on my laptop window. Turn it on. Thank you. This is Ben Shapiro on YouTube. We will make him small because he is a tiny little man, and also so YouTube does not 86 my stream. And this is his very, 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 very bad take on pro-abortion arguments. So, without further ado, let's take the last. Yeah, this will probably take about 30 minutes, and let's have some fun dunking Ben Shapiro's head inside of the proverbial toilet. Here we go.
Wondering why the left have gone completely insane. Perhaps it's because they were raised to be insane and now they're raising their kids the exact same way. Why in the world would a 14-year-old girl think that her world is ending because Donald Trump has been elected president? More importantly, why would she think her world is ending because of possible restrictions on abortion? She's 14.
Interesting opening, right? Maybe because she knows that abortion is something that she may need in the future. And maybe she was, pissed that Donald Trump won because she knew that it would go away, which is exactly what's fucking happening. Please remember that if Donald Trump didn't win the election, then we wouldn't have a 9-6 conservative ultra majority on the Supreme Court, and abortion would not be under threat right now. And here's the thing, it's not that the world is ending, but it is something to be upset about because it's something that could potentially happen to you. It's something that you didn't have to worry about before that you now have to worry about. And Shoma, what's going on, man? How you doing? Thanks for joining. Right. So I could totally understand. I could even understand as a man getting pissed off when abortion, like as a young man getting pissed off that abortion is now gone, because it means that you may be on the hook for children that you don't want, right? That's what really gets me too. All of these like alpha males and shit out there complaining about how they hate abortion and stuff. It's like, dude, so are you just not afraid of getting any girls pregnant? Like, that when that happens, you're fucked, right? Like, as like a young man, a teenage, up until you're like, 20s and shit, you could be on the hook for that child too. Child support, stuff like that. And that can, I mean, this is a selfish thing to say, but it's true. That's the reason why I supported abortion when I was a young man. That is. It's because I didn't want to like be responsible for kids, right? I wanted to, that was my selfish ass fucking reason for supporting abortion. Even more so than, the women's right to choose, all that shit. Yeah, that was great. But, I was 19 and stuff and more interested in getting laid, right? So I guess you could say for me, when I was, a teenager, my support for abortion was from a convenience, aspect, right? It's not anymore because, I'm an adult now and I care about people and I understand the greater, wider implications of it, right? Kind of just sort of solidifies to me how a lot of what, conservative stances on these things are really are kind of like shit that teenagers make up, you know? That's a very, like, if you think about that, that's a very immature, like, way to look at abortion. It's all convenience. It's like, oh, I don't want to. It's very immature way. It's actually something that I myself, when I was 17, that's what I thought. It's kind of like a lot of conservative stances on social issues never evolve out of that greedy teenage phase. I don't know. No, that I think can maybe we should explore that in greater depth one day. Continuing on, Ben Shapiro.
Are leftist parents truly raising their daughters to believe that their right to freedom is dependent on their ability to kill their own offspring in the womb?
Well, that is one freedom that they won't have anymore pretty soon. Yes, the freedom to choose, and I always like the way Ben Shapiro frames things. How did he frame it? To murder your own offspring. You mean to choose when you want to have children and with whom and when? Because that's what it really is. It's not murdering your offspring. It's preventing your offspring from even like forming, right? Can't really kill something before it's complete, before it's born. You're not actually murdering it. It's like, doesn't really make sense. It's like, I don't know. So yeah, that is a freedom that is being taken away. That is the definition of freedom, being able to do what you want with your body and choose when you want to have children, with whom and where and how. That is something that I would classify as freedom, yes. You know. Moving on.
I'll raise my kids to believe that certain rights are sacred: the right to religious practice, the right to freedom of speech, the right to defend ourselves. The notion of teaching a little girl that abortion is the chief right women should expect from their government, or that their life is somehow inevitably impacted by laws cracking down on abortion, that's patently crazy.
You notice how he went from a right to the chief right? Notice that? See, that's a little rhetorical trick that bad debaters like to use all the time. Say, you notice before he said, "Oh, it's they're teaching that this is freedom in order to terminate a pregnancy," and then he listed a bunch of other rights that everybody would agree with conceivably. Your right to free speech, your right to religious worship, stuff like that. And then he turned back around and then reframed the right to abortion, saying that this is the chief right that the girls are like complaining about. Nobody ever said it was the chief right. You see how that's a sort of a moving the goalpost thing. That's a rhetorical trick. And it's basically designed to kind of like he just sort of basically just lied to you is what he really did. That's really what that does. It's framing the opponent's argument in such a way that makes it sound ridiculous, makes it sound more, more ridiculous than it actually is, right? When you actually take it, and Ben Shapiro loves doing shit like this. This is why he talks super fucking fast too, because you can't really process it. If you were in a room with him debating him right now, he would pull that and you wouldn't have time to actually like call him out on it, right? But it's like if you actually take like 5 seconds to actually like think about what he just said, it's sort of like the stupidest fucking shit ever. It falls apart so easily. The man is not smart, or at the very least, the stances he's taking are not smart. He may be pretty intelligent, I would say. I would say Ben Shapiro is intelligent, right? The actual stances that he takes, the actual things he says are not smart. The actual things he says are standard conservative bullshit and are easily debunked. You know, I guess what's smart about him is his presentation, and he's somehow managed to fool people into thinking that he's some kind of fucking philosopher or whatever. He's not a philosopher. He's reading this shit out of a book. It's the way that he's presenting himself, I guess, that makes him look like he's like some kind of fucking intellectual like powerhouse and shit. The guy's a fucking lightweight. Moving on. We're only 18 seconds in. We're 42 seconds in. Okay, moving on.
The fact that some leftists apparently teach their kids that liberty can be boiled down not to individual choice and responsibility for that choice, but to the ability to pay a clinic to kill a baby in the womb and then take it out, that's pretty disgusting. As the parent of a daughter,
That's literal straw man what he just did. So what he just did is it's called a straw man argument. You hear people talking about straw mans all the time. That's exactly what a straw man just is. When you frame someone else's argument in such a way that they did not frame it, like when you basically take someone's argument, reframe it, and present it back in a way that makes it sound ridiculous, when in real life that's not the argument at all. No one is ever teaching their children that their right to abortion is the end all be all of your rights. That's not a thing. That doesn't exist. He made that up, right? He made that up, and even if we go back 30 seconds and listen to the first part of his like speech here again, you'll notice that that's not what he said to begin with, right? He said, like, why are children thinking the world's, ending because abortion is being, like, restricted, right? That's what he said. He didn't say that, oh, it's the children are being taught that it's like the fucking foundation of all of their rights as a human being. No, right? But that's how he's framing it. And when you frame it like that, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Because that's not the actual argument. That's a straw man. Let's see. This is bad debate tactics, right? If your stance actually made logical and consistent sense, then you don't have to rely on bad debate tactics. You can just actually state your argument and convince people that way. It's because he knows his argument is unpopular that he has to like rely on tricks like this. That's what it is.
Here's what I plan to tell her about abortion. I plan to say, sweetheart, when you get married and when you have sex and get pregnant, that will be the greatest joy you can experience. I know that because it was the greatest joy that your mom.
When you have sex, the greatest joy. Okay. Please remember Ben Shapiro did not lose his virginity until he was 26. He says that did not believe in sex before marriage. He did not get married until 26. So please do not take sexual advice from Ben Shapiro. You know, we all know about the wet ass P word controversy with him and all that other stuff. Ben Shapiro is not the person you should be talking to when it comes to sex. He does not know what he is talking about at all. It's not just the blind leading the blind. It's like a guy with no arms and legs leading someone on a hiking trail when it comes to Ben Shapiro. Anyway, moving on.
And I ever experienced. Your birth was the highlight of our lives. Your existence is a timeless reminder that God loves us and he loves you and that he favors us with miracles every day, none greater than your creation. You're beloved of.
Getting pregnant is not a miracle. Miracles are supposed to be supernatural occurrences, right? That's what a miracle is supposed to be. A miracle is supposed to be parting the Red Sea, right? Fucking, rising from the dead, bringing somebody back from the dead, curing someone's blindness. That's supposed to be a fucking miracle, right? Appearing in the middle of the sky with a fucking like vision and all this other shit, right? Like blowing a load inside of a girl and getting pregnant, that's not a fucking miracle. That's not a miracle. That's a mundane thing that happens every fucking day to millions and millions of people. I mean, unless God's just working overtime, God's just super overtime with the miracle gun going around, spraying it upon all of these like people who are out there getting it on. Miracle for you, a miracle for you. That's not, no, that's, that's dumb. That's dumb and it cheapens the word. And it's sort of like, I don't even really think Ben Shapiro believes that, to be honest. What, childbirth is a miracle? No. Fully don't fucking believe that at all. If he cared about that, he would support things like prenatal care. He would support things like free healthcare. He would support things like free education and all that other shit. He doesn't support any of that stuff. He doesn't give a fuck about any of that. Conservatives don't give a fuck about any of that stuff at all. They don't care about supporting children at all the minute they're fucking born. Right? They don't care about actually helping you support the child in the womb either. They care about children so much? What about, all right, free natal care, free prenatal care for everybody? Nope. They'll shoot that down every fucking time. He'll shoot it down himself. Right? So don't give me any of this shit that's childbirth is a fucking miracle. Now, get the fuck out of here, right? I mean, goddamn. What if you're not religious? That's it. It's just so. It's like shit that like teenagers think up. You know what I mean? Like whenever I hear one of these guys speak, like him or Steven Crowder or like fucking Dave Rubin or something, it's like literally crap that like when you were like 17, 16, 17, like this is what I thought, you know? when I was 17. And it's like, dude, have you just not been like using your brain for the last 20 years? Like Ben Shapiro has to be at least 37. Like, have you just not thought about anything? And like you just had it all figured out when you were 17, huh? I guess I don't know. Anyway, moving on.
God, and your children will be too. Children are the greatest gift we can receive. To spurn that gift, to destroy another human life, is a great evil, no matter any countervailing concerns. Now, here's the thing: we're religious, but even if we weren't,
Yeah, well, you know what? Like I said before, it's a big evil when you go to a clinic and get an abortion. Not so evil when a drone strike kills a few children in, Palestine, is it? Right? Not so evil when, when Israeli soldiers, like, kill a few children. Not so evil when, like, we drop bombs on a wedding where the bride is pregnant and a bunch of children die. Not so evil when we use a drone strike to kill, like, the 16-year-old child of an American citizen. You never hear Ben Shapiro complaining about those evils, right? I would say those things are evil. You know, I bet you $1 million we could go through every single one of Ben Shapiro's videos that he has on his Daily Wire website, and we will never find him talking about any of that at all, right? Because he doesn't actually give a shit about children. He doesn't care about children. Keep that in mind. See, none of this stuff makes sense unless you frame it, you know, correctly and understand where his stance and where all the other conservative stances really are coming from. They don't actually give a shit about children, you know. They care about making you do what they fucking want you to do. So, anyway, that's what social issues are about.
that lecture wouldn't change all that much. Children are the greatest thing in life, and they are lives regardless of whether you're religious or secular. And suggesting that true freedom lies in the ability to kill children in the womb, it's just disgusting. I mean, it's gross. Come on.
Yeah, but fetus is not a child. That's the other thing. So you notice how like his entire stance here just sort of relies on giving fetuses the same rights as children. Well, like we said before, children don't have rights in this country because they don't, right? Not really. Or rather, they don't have the full set of rights, I'll put it that way. I mean, yeah, you're not allowed to murder a child, right? But still, that's what his entire stance relies on. It relies on treating a zygote who's, 24 hours old the same as a full grown, you know, baby that's just been born. And doesn't really work that way. At some point, I could even, I would even like capitulate a point here and say, okay, at some point, I myself personally would be willing to admit that an unborn child would have, that right, you know, at some point. I guess the problem is like, when does that happen, right? I would say it's when a child develops a brain and a nervous system and is able to conceivably feel pain. That's when I would put that limit on there. You know, Roe versus Wade actually has that limit built in. So what I'm saying is not controversial from a pro-choice standpoint, right? If you support Roe versus Wade, then this is what you support. Because that's what it says in there. It says that during the third trimester or whatever, you can put limits on abortion, right? I would even concede that. But giving full human rights to a fucking fetus? No. No. That at some point it's not even a human being. I guess that's when you can determine when does it become a human being. We can debate about that. We can debate about when you should be allowed to put those restrictions on there. But what I don't find debatable is the idea that, like, from the nanosecond of conception, that the fetus, the zygote, deserves like full human rights protection. No, that's total unacceptable bullshit. So, moving on.
Propagandizing 14-year-olds with that suggestion, that's even more gross. But if you tell your kids that evil Republicans are coming in the night to raid your womb, it's no wonder they get hysterical when
It's kind of the opposite, right? 'Cause that's not evil Republicans would not be coming to raid your womb. They would be coming to throw you in prison for doing something that until recently was legal. So it's all framing too. That's another rhetorical device this guy uses a lot. He tries to frame things that he can't logically defend as ridiculous. There's a that's not exactly that's not exactly a straw man fallacy, right? It's more of like what is it? Ad hominem, I think, is what that is. I don't know. I'd have to look that up. I mean, I'm not an expert when it comes to like the fucking, fallacy terms or whatever, but it's definitely it's a rhetorical device that you use when, your argument is like impossible to effectively defend on its own merits, right? Basically he's trying to get you to think that his stance has more worth than it actually does without actually like examining what his stance is, because if you actually examine it, it falls apart. Moving on. Okay, I want to move. Okay, so I want to get into, because he starts talking about with teenagers and shit. Because Ben Shapiro doesn't actually debate adults, if you notice. He likes to go to college campuses and debate college kids and stuff like that, people who are not like prepared to actually debate him. If he ever debates like an actual real person who actually knows what they're talking about, which he doesn't really do anymore, but whenever he would do that in the past, it would always be with a moderator there. And so basically, he only really debates people he knows he can defeat, and when he has control of the mic so that he can turn the mic off whenever he like feels like he's getting his ass kicked, which happens more often than not. So, anyway, let's move on where he talks about a couple of people here.
Controlling women's bodies and just about the separate life. Like, after the baby is born, how come when people don't care about them? They don't care where they end up in foster care, they don't care about the mother being poor. Like,
Okay, I do care about the mother being poor. I do care about
Okay.
foster care.
okay, but why don't you advocate for that?
Let's remove that. Let's turn on some subtitles because that was a little hard for her to like. I could barely like understand what she was saying. So here we
To
go.
lose elections.
So why do you think it's not about controlling women's bodies and just about the separate life? Like, after the baby is born, how come when people don't care about them? They don't care where they end up in foster care, they don't care about the mother being poor. Like,
Okay, I do care about the mother being poor. I do care about foster care.
okay, but why don't you advocate for that though?
No, he doesn't. Why don't you help pay for that though? Okay, let's see what he says. Because first off, he doesn't care about that. All right. Ben Shapiro wants to cut taxes that go, that could go to those types of care. He's against things like universal health care. So this girl's making a pretty good point. Let's see what he says.
Because
For
Planned
what?
Parenthood is supposed to prevent abortions.
Because, Planned Parenthood doesn't prevent abortions. They perform hundreds of thousands of abortions a year. They perform 300,000 abortions a year. They're the leading abortion mill in the United States.
Evidence for that though.
That they perform 300,000 abortions a year from Planned Parenthood. That's my evidence.
You notice he avoided the question there? The question there was about healthcare, was about, helping children after they're born and prenatal care, stuff like that. And he said, I support that. And then she goes, where's your evidence? And then now he's talking about Planned Parenthood. Kind of completely avoided her question there. That's another rhetorical trick. He misdirected the audience and is now talking about Planned Parenthood and then got a nice little chuckle from everybody in the audience there, right? What about the question she asked him? How come you don't support, healthcare? How come you don't support like healthcare for after the child is born, right? Or prenatal care and any of that stuff? Completely didn't answer that, you know, because he doesn't actually give a shit about that. When she asked him, he said, "Oh, well, I do support those things. Where's your evidence?" And then he goes, "Oh, my evidence that Planned Parenthood causes abortions." Like he immediately pivoted to Planned Parenthood there. He changed the subject on her because his actual stance is that he doesn't give a fuck about those things, right? The guy is not the guy's a moron. You know, his only genius comes in his ability to bullshit people. He would make a very, very, very good used car salesman, this guy, because he definitely knows how to misdirect people and he knows how to like debate with people who are not prepared. Moving on.
They don't dispute that. No one disputes that.
Like birth control and cancer.
I'm not anti-birth control.
I know.
Birth control is extraordinarily cheap.
That provides affordable birth control, which would in turn.
Okay, they're not the only people in America who provide affordable birth control. You can go get a pack of condoms down at the local CVS for $12.
Yeah, that's not the point. You know, that's not the point. So now he's misdirecting it here. So her question back was like a plan, because her question there, what she said is actually true. Planned Parenthood doesn't always, only do abortions, right? They actually do provide some of that free prenatal care. They do actually provide post-birth care for free for a lot of people. They provide things like, contraceptives and all that in order to prevent abortions. They do a big part of that. And she's saying, well, what about the good things that they do? And he's just instantly shitting on it. Oh, you can just go get condoms at the CVS for $12, right? Planned Parenthood will do things like give you, IVDs, IUDs and stuff like that. Interuterine devices, right? Those kinds of things. Those implants that basically prevent you from getting pregnant. You can get that kind of thing, right? Because condoms are not always effective. And you have to actually get the man to cooperate sometimes. And here's another thing. If you get raped, it's not like you can ask your rapist to wear a condom, can you? Can you just be like, oh, hey, before you force yourself upon me, put on this Trojan here so we can be safe about it? No, doesn't always work that way, right? So he's once again avoiding the question. This is basically the exact same thing as saying just go to another state to get one, right? Oh, you can get it somewhere else, so we don't need Planned Parenthood. Yeah, get the fuck out of here. It's moronic, and it's just every time I watch this guy, I don't understand. I mean, how do people think this guy's smart? Like, how do they think that anything that he says makes any sense? Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand how you can watch this guy and just be like, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. He so obviously fucking doesn't. Like, he so obviously doesn't have a clue and is just really, his only like genius comes in his ability to like bullshit people and redirect the conversation to something that he wants. This is kind of why I don't debate people, every once in a while I'll get a guy that comes on who says they want to debate me for whatever reason, and I don't really go for that because this is what debates actually are, what we're watching right here. People arguing, and it's not always the person with the best argument who wins a debate. It's the person with the best performance, right? And if you know all of these tricks, like Ben Shapiro obviously does, like Ben Shapiro uses in every one of these little comments, if you know all of these tricks, then you perform better and then the audience will cheer for you, especially if they're there to support you in the first place. It doesn't have to make sense. You don't have to have the best argument. You just have to come off like you know what you're talking about. You just have to like perform better. And that's what debates are. Debates are about convincing the audience that you're correct, not actually being correct. And that's why I always counter with, hey, why don't you just make a video and you can use any of my footage however you want, and then we can just do the debate like that, long form video style. And none of the guys that have ever wanted to debate me so far, there's been at least like 5 who have come to me and said, I want to debate you. Every single person who's offered to debate me when I say, just make a long form video, none of them ever want to do that. And I don't know, is it because people don't watch those long form videos anymore? Or is it because you can't use tricks like this when you like actually have time to sit there and examine it, right? It's much easier to pull the wool over somebody's eyes when you're moving super fast and you got to think on your feet and like, you don't have time to go back and examine what they actually say. I really think that's a big part of it. Moving on.
Condoms great. People need medication too.
Yes, and it's true that most forms of birth control are also extraordinarily cheap on an annualized basis. Unless you have a severe problem, most birth control is very cheap and readily available. And I'm not against people going and getting that from.
No, not correct. Not correct at all. Condoms are cheap, right? Birth control pills, not exactly. IUDs, not exactly. Things like diaphragm, shit like that, no. You know, condoms are cheap. You can go get a pack of condoms for $20. The rest of that shit, no, not so cheap, right? The forms of birth control that women can do themselves are more expensive, right? And also not convenient. That's the other thing too. Condoms are convenient, the other ones are not. And especially, the thing about condoms is not only are they not always effective, they can have holes and shit in them. Sometimes guys will fucking lie and take the condom off and shit. That happens all the fucking time, right? So they're not exactly trustworthy, you know. So, especially if you're talking about like preventing pregnancy. And here's the thing, even if they were, so what if they were? Let's say that what he's saying is true, which it isn't, but even if it was true that most forms of contraception were cheap, what's the problem with having a centralized place where you can go get it for free? Why are you objecting to that, right? I mean, okay, let's take that. Let's outlaw abortion completely and then just be like, okay, Planned Parenthood is still there to give you free contraception and shit like that. Do you think conservatives would go for that? Nope. No, they wouldn't. They would ban that as well. Okay. So he's basically lying to her right now. Now whether he actually knows he's lying or not, I don't know. I don't think he's done the research at all. I think he's talking out of his ass here about it. Right. But he's definitely incorrect. Confidently incorrect about this entire little thing here. The exact opposite of what Ben Shapiro said through this entire little spiel is the actual truth.
Planned Parenthood. As you may have noticed, I'm mostly against abortion. If you want to go to Planned Parenthood and get a contraceptive, go for it. I don't care. I do care when you start killing babies. This is a problem for me.
Other conservatives, there's other conservatives out there who are trying to turn back the clock, and are actually like, there's some laws going in Louisiana. There is another law in Idaho, and then Tennessee, Marshall Blackburn of Tennessee, where they actually are thinking of restricting access to contraceptives as well. Because, another court case, which was based on the right to privacy, based on Roe versus Wade, was a court case. I don't have the actual court case in front of me. Well, yeah, I do. It's called Griswold versus Connecticut. That was a court case that said that people were allowed to buy contraceptives, right? It may shock people to know that at one point in our country's history, contraceptives were restricted as well. Straight up illegal in some places. And this court case, Griswold versus Connecticut, said that married people were allowed to buy contraceptives. And that was based on Roe versus Wade, the right to privacy in Roe versus Wade. Kind of hard to imagine, huh? Because now, you can basically get condoms everywhere. I mean, some places like schools will fucking straight give them away. Excuse me, right? Kind of hard to imagine that at some point in the country, it was against the law to buy rubbers, right? Don't think for a nanosecond that the people who are against abortion now don't want to go back to that, because they do. This is on the chopping block. This is coming soon. They're already passing, proposing laws that will restrict this. They want to overturn that. And if we allow them to get away with overturning abortion and getting rid of Roe v. Wade, it's only a matter of time, right? In some states in this country, you know, in the blue states where you're actually allowed to live the way you want to fucking live, you'll be able to have all the sex you want. It'll only be in, places like Texas and Florida and Alabama where we're going to suddenly get this explosion of teenage pregnancies. People are going to wonder where this all fucking came from, right? And it's like, well, maybe you shouldn't have outlawed this shit. I don't know. Moving on.
But what about in rape and incest situations?
Okay, so so
Yeah,
here's
I
the
know
question.
It's different, yes.
I mean, this is a long conversation. I'm enjoying it, actually, which is why I'm allowing you to stay. But
Yep. Was why I'm allowing you to stay. Remember, he has complete control here. He can kick people off anytime he feels like, right? Not really a debate when one guy gets to control everything, right? Anyway, we're talking about rape and incest here. Let's go on.
but the question of rape and incest, first of all, important to note, rape and incest are not only a vast minority of abortion cases, they're an extraordinarily low percentage of abortion cases. So if we can first stipulate that all the other abortions are bad, then we can talk about that other one. Can we do that? Are all the
What the fuck you wait? So first off, okay, let's break down what he just said. All right. Rape and incest is a very small amount of abortions. How does he know that? He doesn't know. He doesn't have any stats behind that at all, right? But let's assume that he's correct. Why does that make it any less important, right? I've got the feeling that he's about to take the stance that there should be no allowance for rape and abortion, right? I would bet my left testicle on that. That is what he's about to say. I have not watched this ahead of time. Okay. But why would that matter? So it's a small amount. So that means there would only be a small amount of abortions, right? It's kind of like me saying like, oh, well, only a very small amount of people get shot with firearms. So that's why we're not going to outlaw firearms. You know what I mean? Like, it's like me saying like, here's a better example than that. It's like let's say cherry Pepsi caused people's legs to fall off, but it only happened like one out of like every million million can of cherry Pepsi. If you drink it, your legs fall off. And you go, yeah, well, that only happens in a 1 in a million chance that it'll happen, so we're not going to do anything about that. It's like, no, the risk is there of severe bodily harm, right? And there are 400 million people in the country, so do something about that, right? Sorry, that risk is too high. You know what I mean? Like, so we know that rape and abortion, rape and incest actually is a thing that people get abortions for every day in this country, right? So why, you know, how exactly just like the fact that it's not super duper common, how does that make it any better to outlaw it? It doesn't. It doesn't. If you think about it for half a fucking second, it does not. You should any any law that's written fairly should have these protections inside of it, right? There should be no example, that's because what that does is that just victimizes the victim again. You were a victim once from a rape, and now you're going to be a victim again when the state forces you to carry this baby that you fucking hate, right? Let's see what he says. So, but you notice how he's changing the subject here? Like, let's rewind this just about a couple seconds. Watch how he changes the subject, right?
of rape and incest, first of all, important to note, rape and incest are not only a vast minority of abortion cases, they're an extraordinarily low percentage of abortion cases. So if we can first stipulate that all the other abortions are bad, then we can talk about that other one.
See that? He just changed the subject right there. Why? Because he can't win with rape, and if we're just talking only about rape and incest, he knows he can't win. He knows that the audience is not going to go for it because everybody in that audience says, yeah, they all agree with that. We should allow women to abort children that are the result of rape and incest. He knows that's a very, very unpopular opinion. So now he's putting on a condition there that has nothing to do with the thing that we're talking about. He's changing the subject is what he's doing. He's basically saying, okay, now if we can agree that all other abortions are bad, then we'll talk about rape and incest. Right? That's that's another rhetorical trick there, basically changing the subject and then putting an unrelated restriction. If you can agree to this, then that. Well, no, that has nothing to do with what we're fucking talking about, right? It's another trick. It's like he did that on purpose. Look at his face, because he knows what he's about to say is going to be super unpopular.
Can we do that? Are all the other abortions bad, or are those ones okay? And you're just using this as an excuse to make the other ones okay.
There we go. This is just an excuse now. Okay, so, rape and abortion, like what is he implying there? He's basically saying, oh, you don't really care about rape and incest. You're just using it as an excuse in order to make the other abortions okay, right? So that basically puts the idea in his viewers' minds right there that this woman is being dishonest. It's fucking ridiculous, man.
They're all okay.
Ah, good. Someone who's honest. So,
Great.
who's the honest fellow? Who's okay? Yay, honest people. Good. I like the honesty. Okay, so all abortions are okay. So, a sign that I can't read because it has lots of words on it. Okay, so.
All right, he's flustered. See how he's flustered now. Because he didn't think they would go for the bait, because they didn't go for his trick. He was expecting that girl to say, yes, I agree that the other abortions are bad. Right? But they didn't go for it. They actually said, yes, they're all okay. So now he's got to come up with some bullshit. So now he's stalling. Right? He's talking about other shit that has nothing to do with anything. Oh, look at that sign over there. Oh, I like how people are honest. Oh, let me drink some water real quick when I think up my next line of attack. Such bullshit. Such bullshit. This guy's a fucking idiot.
I have one question for you and one question only on abortion. Does the vagina, the vaginal canal, magically confer personhood?
What?
Answer. Does the vagina magically confer personhood?
The fuck is he? All right. I told you I didn't watch this before. I have no idea what he's fucking talking about here. Does the vagina magically confer personhood? No. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, raised hands are okay. You, sir.
No, the first breath does.
The first breath confers personhood. Okay, so if the baby is in the womb and is exactly the same size and has not yet breathed, and you take a knife and you stab the baby in the head, a fully formed 9-month-old baby, it is not a human. The only thing that makes it a human is when it takes a breath.
So he's talking now. He's moving the goalposts again away from rape and incest, and now he's talking about late-term abortions. This is what he's talking about, a fully formed. That's a late-term abortion. The 9-month thing, that is illegal in every state in this country. You cannot get a late-term abortion anywhere in this country. No place. That's already illegal, what he's describing. So, wow. This guy's fucking slimy. He's so slimy.
It has to independently breathe.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to stick to it, yeah, because I'm also pro-capital punishment and pro-selective suicide. So I'm going to stick with it.
Selective suicide? Yeah, I assume you mean elective suicide.
I mean, elective suicide.
Notice how we're not talking about rape and incest here? Can we get back to the
That's good,
subject,
because that wouldn't
please?
be suicide, that'd be homicide. That, by the way, I'm for capital punishment too, because people who kill people should be killed, but babies who have not killed people should not. And this is my basic position on abortion. So let me just, but I'll get your answer because you're the one who asked the question.
Yes, please get to the fucking answer, please. You know, say he's trying to go all over the place here. All right, what are you gonna say?
Are you willing to stipulate that all the other abortions are bad? Just rape and incest bother you?
That doesn't make any sense either. Why? Why does it have to be all the other ones are bad and only rape and incest is okay? Why can't it just be all of it? Say he's already framing it in such a way that he can like slime his way out of it here.
I mean, no, I believe a woman should have the right to
Got it. So it's an excuse, right? So it's an excuse so that we can say that, so that we can take the marginal case and then say that the marginal case applies to all cases. Okay, that's again faulty thinking. But if you want me to answer specifically,
No, that's not faulty thinking. He's framing her argument like that. That's what he's doing is faulty thinking here. That's not what she's saying. That's what he's framing it. Ugh, dude. This guy's so fucking dishonest here, man.
on rape and incest, here is my basic answer: rapists should be castrated or killed. You shouldn't kill babies. End of story.
But are they ever castrated and killed? Most rapists don't even get convicted.
I agree, and that's usually the left side of the aisle because the left side wants to let them out after 5 years in prison.
No. Leftists don't want to let rapists out of prison. That's bullshit. But what the fuck? What? How does he? Okay, so he's basically said that no, you have to keep the rapist baby, is what he's saying.
I want them castrated or killed. I'm telling you what my belief is. My belief is not public policy at the moment. But I think, would you agree with me on that one? Can we at least get a little agreement to finish this particular parlay? Okay, should rapists be castrated or killed?
Well, yes.
Okay, good, yeah, okay, we agree. Thanks.
As a woman.
What the fuck was that? So did you notice that? You noticed? Oh my god, that was the most dishonest fucking thing. His actual stance popped out there for half a second, right? He's like, "Oh well, I don't think we should kill babies." So he did say there that you should be forced to keep a rapist baby. He did say that. But you notice how he hit it and then instead attacked, saying that, well, rapists should be castrated. Castrating, that has nothing to do with the fucking question. Oh my god, that was the most dishonest shit ever. And then he got cheers at the end because by the end they weren't talking about aborting a rapist's baby. They were talking about castrating rapists. The guy's a fucking moron. I don't know. I can't take any much more of this. You know what? Here, let me put down in here. There's only about 3 minutes left. If you guys want to watch the rest of this fucking monstrosity, it's here for you. Anyway, that's such bullshit. I need to end this because I'm already half an hour over. Ben Shapiro is an idiot. You should never listen to anything that Ben Shapiro says ever. The guy's a fucking moron. But you know what I need to do? I really have to go to the bathroom. So if you guys are cool with it, I'm gonna like go pee real quick and then I'll come back and read some comments. Do you guys mind? Give me 2 minutes to pee. I will be right back. And we're back. Sorry about that, folks. I am such an old man. Anyway, let's read some comments and then let's go ahead and let's read a few comments and then we'll end this. We're already at 1:40, so this stream is going to go 3 hours. And but that's cool, you know. I did want to basically play that Ben Shapiro video because it's embarrassing how, I don't know, the guy's such a fucking idiot. He's like, it's embarrassing how like manipulative that man is, you know. And I guess I should maybe not call him an idiot because he seems to be like, you know, Machiavellian almost and how he manipulates people. I think it's just the people that like him are the fucking idiots, man. Like that whole thing right there, he deflected so many times. Like he like fucking changed the subject like 4 times and shit. By the end, it's like they weren't even like he never even answered that woman's question until the very end, and then he just threw it in there really, really quick, you know, so that in such a way that people, you know, like basically said, oh, well, we need to, you know, I think rapists should be killed, but not babies. So if you were to object to that, then it makes it sound like you're objecting to rapists being castrated and killed, you know, because then if you were to say, well, that's bullshit, then he'll be like, well, what? You think we shouldn't castrate and kill rapists? It's like, it's another trick. I don't know, man. Conservatives really need to start learning how to fucking think critically. Anyway, reading some comments here. Let's see what we got. Let's come over here. I'm not sure where we left off with the comments, so I'm just going to start anywhere. Dynacat loves me. I have no use for bodily autonomy as a principal argument. It's something then always has to be a balancing of interests, not an assertable right. Um, you mean in like bodily autonomy when it comes to like an anti-abortion argument? Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think myself personally, I agree with how it was laid out in Roe v. Wade. You know, and then later on with the Planned Parenthood case, I think viability of the fetus is a perfectly good measuring stick. You know, and I even think that's something that pro-life people generally agree with. You know, most pro-life people will generally agree that if the fetus can survive outside of the womb, then maybe you just instead of an abortion, you induce early, um, you induce like an early birth, like a premature birth or something, right? I think most people would agree with that. It's like maybe you have a window of time to where you get an abortion, and then if you pass that window, then that's where the legal restrictions can kick in. I think most people would agree with that too. I mean, there's always going to be people who don't agree with it, but I think the majority of people would agree with that. And that's kind of how it's been for like the last 40 years and seems to be working out pretty good for us all, right? So, but yeah, I mean, still the bodily autonomy argument though, like, yeah, I don't buy that either. And most conservatives don't actually use that argument against abortion either. They usually come at it from a religious like angle, you know, like almost always. It's almost always a religious angle. You know, it's the little babies and it's murder and all this other shit. It's like no, it's clearly them like enforcing their religion on people. So, let's see. Dynacat, you could be fired from a job for misgendering or not, depending on what the owner or the manager or whatever feels. A conservative ought to have no problem with that. Um, I don't think that most places, like, if you just do it by mistake, it's not a problem. And I don't even think most trans people will get on your case for that if you just mistakenly misgender somebody, because it's not always clear. Men can have long hair and earrings and stuff too. Women can have short hair and wear pants and shirts with collars also, right? So it's not always, but the thing is, I think what it is once somebody tells you what their preferred pronouns are and you purpose or or what their gender is and you purposely use it, you know, go against what they tell you, then you get into harassment territory. So it's kind of different. It's like just by mistake, that's one thing. It's like, oh, well, I'm actually, my pronouns are he, her, or he, him. Oh, okay, sorry, right? But if you just keep fucking doing it, like that's when I think, yeah, maybe, that it's not just misgendering somebody. It's actually at that point, like the same thing as harassing somebody. It's the same thing as using a racial slur in that point because you're doing it to like fucking disparage that person. And then, yeah, I mean, if you can get fired for using racial slurs, then yeah, you could probably get fired for harassing somebody by not, using their preferred pronouns. I got no problem with that at all. And yeah, I do agree also that conservatives should have no problem with that either because it should be, you know, I mean, they all support at will employment anyway, right? So what's the problem? What, your boss is not allowed to fire you for something? I'm pretty sure they would all say, no, your boss is allowed to fire you for any fucking reason whatsoever. That's usually what anti-union, pro-business conservatives usually say. So, anyway. In Shoma, oh, wait, one more. Dynacat loves me. My point on universal health care is that the poor don't cease to be poor when it is a thing. They are poor with better health care in general. This is true. But it's also an expense that they don't have to pay for, right? So, health insurance really does eat up a lot of your income, right? If you like, especially if you're buying it independently, if you don't get it through your job, and healthcare in general is super expensive. Like I said, I mean, it can cost you tens of thousands of dollars just to have a child and to take the child, and let alone taking the child to the doctor and prenatal care and postnatal care and all this other shit. So if that's an expense you don't have to worry about, even if you are poor, even if you are below the federal poverty line, if that's not a thing that you have to like factor into your budget, you know, it very well could be that you could afford to have a child. Maybe you might make that decision. It's like, well, if I don't have to like basically spend the same amount of money as buying a new car right off of the fucking bat, maybe they might decide that yeah, they're poor, but they can handle it. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's what it is. It's taking one of the pressures off. You know what I mean? It takes one of the pressures off so that people don't have to decide between healthcare or rent, for example. That actually is a decision that gets made, a lot. Am I going to go to the doctor or am I going to pay rent this month? That is a decision people have to make, right? And, if we make it easier, I mean, yeah, it might not like stop all the abortions out there, but I'm pretty sure, I don't know. I would assume at least that some of those people might decide that they can afford to have a child. I mean, I don't know. We need some actual data to back this up, but the data is there that people who have less money get more abortions. So why don't we just make the cost of living cheaper? That could be one way to reduce abortions, right? Let's see. In Shoma, this is also a massive economical issue that screw over more than just women and minorities despite the distractors. Why otherwise the lack of choice helps the rich get more bodies for the capitalist grinder. And probably a reason why the corporate Democrats in Congress are barely lifting a finger to protect abortion rights. That is, I think, more of a long-term view. I don't know if you'll ever get a politician to admit that they need more babies for capitalism. Uh, you may hear conservative authors or
social scientists and shit like that say that very thing, you know. You'll also hear, I think, some people like white nationalists and shit will say that. Like they'll say things like, people who believe in like white genocide and shit will say we need more babies or whatever, like we need more white babies and that kind of thing. Um, I mean, there are like also like yeah, for example, in Japan, for example, there's a worry that since birth rates are like at negative, like they're like below zero in Japan, that in a few generations there won't be enough people to sustain their economy. So there is some truth to what you're saying. I don't know if we're at that point just yet. Like, I don't think any of the opposition to abortion though, like, comes from that just yet in the United States, right? Because we don't really have a problem with our population, even though the birth rates in the United States are very low for, you know, people of certain social economic strata. Our population is not going down in the United States, and it's mainly because of immigration. So people don't have, people population growth in the United States is at zero. So people are only having enough babies to replace themselves, but we get plenty of people coming in every year from immigration, and it's not just south of the border; it's from all over the world. People come here, so plenty of we've got plenty of people in the workforce. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm not so sure that that is like, yeah, I don't know. You don't really hear that objection too much, at least when it comes to objecting to abortion. The idea that we don't have enough like bodies for like to like sustain capitalism. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure maybe somebody out there said it, but I don't think that's that big of a, like an objection. You know what I mean? Maybe. I don't know. Moving on, Danicat. I don't agree that raising wages will make much difference. When wages go up broadly, prices go up to match them, leaving everyone where they were. Well, if we could raise wages without raising prices, then I think it would matter. See, the thing is like I think I figured out what causes inflation, right? And I think it's when we actually do raise wages and like more people at the bottom actually get money, that's when prices go up, you know? Because when we were like doing quantitative easing for like a decade and a half and just straight up giving the banks money and then the banks were just giving it to corporations and they were just taking that money and buying back their stocks and stuff, inflation didn't go up. And it didn't go up for like literally 12 years, like 14 years even since 2008 when how much money exactly has been given in quantitative easing? Let's look that up. Let's look up quantitative easing. For those of you out there who don't know what quantitative easing is, it's basically when the central banks like the Federal Reserve would just give money to other banks who then in turn and it was basically just to keep especially after the 2008 financial crisis, it was to keep the banks solvent. They just injected trillions of dollars into the into the economy, right? Let's say how much. Let's see. Quantitative easing is still something that's going on. $700 billion in March 2020 alone. So how much since 2008 have they been given away here? Let's see. Fourth quantitative easing operation since the 2008 financial crisis. Maybe not so easy to get stats on this. It looks like they've been doing $700 billion a year, at least four times. I've read someplace that it was up to at least like 4 or $5 trillion since 2008, but it's probably been more. Some other websites will say something like 14 trillion, but we don't really know if it's that high. Um, Definitely a lot. It's been at least several trillion dollars since 2008. I don't know. I'll look up the exact numbers one of these days. But that all that money just went to banks and corporations and shit. And it seems like, well, inflation was rather steady all throughout the 2010s, right? And then, we have a pandemic and some Amazon workers get 15 bucks an hour and then suddenly like, inflation is fucking like way off the hook. So, kind of seems to me like that's sort of why inflation went up. It's because, well, normal ordinary people actually got like a wage increase. So, prices went up accordingly, but if we just give it straight to the rich people, it's fine. I don't know. I don't know, man. It's just another way the system's rigged. You know what I mean? There's probably some truth to that. I don't know. Maybe I'm just talking out of my ass. Moving on. Let's see. Adversary Fandom 2. Have you ever heard of Shapiro's novel True Allegiance? I saw a book review of it once. Of yeah, it's kind of like there's like a guy who's sort of like a I guess you would say um, Jesse Jackson type character who's like, like a criminal or something like that. And like, I don't know. I saw like a book review of it where a dude shat all over it and it was funny. But see, I have no motivation I'm not going to read Ben Shapiro's book. And, to be honest, if he just wrote shitty books that nobody read, I wouldn't have a problem with him. It's like, my problem with Ben Shapiro is that people watch that drivel like we just watched and think this guy is like, not only intelligent, but that he speaks for an entire movement or whatever. And then these people go out and they vote based on the shit that they just like heard. That's like, if you just fucking took 2 seconds to like actually examine what this guy says, you'd realize he's a goddamn idiot. I don't know. I don't know, man. Ben Shapiro's a fucking moron. Moving on. Uh, let's see. Lusa Hedgehog, she's 14. Yeah, and it won't be like she will turn 18 in 4 years. Exactly. And Shoma, Bill Hicks and his I destroyed the whole civilizations with a gray sock joke is a more accurate description of childbirth and how common and non-miraculous pointless it all is. Oh, really? Bill Hicks had a comedy routine about that? No, I'll have to watch that. But, I guess that's right. I mean, it's not a miracle. It's like, it's not a miracle when fucking like, when like 100 million people are like doing it every fucking day. Like, how many people I think there's something like 150 million people a year are born around the whole world. Like what, 150 million fucking miracles? Like, not really much of a miracle anymore, is it? It's a little more mundane. Right? Like, where's like, I don't know, is God just sitting there like 150 million times a year waving his magic wand, giving everybody a fucking miracle? Like, kind of sounds more like a natural process to me, you know? Anyway. Lusa Hedgehog, some forms of birth control are not cheap. Yes, exactly. In Shoma, let's not forget most of the pro-life leaders are wealthy and well off, so of course they won't care about long-term consequences or limitations for the poors. The poors also include conservative voters who leap to their doom before looking because their team leaders tell them to. Yeah, that's the big rub there is that, the conservative women who live in Texas and Florida and all that shit, that have money will be easily able to just fly to another state and get abortions all they fucking want, you know. And it's really just the other conservative people, the poor ones who are voting against their best interests, who are going to end up getting screwed. So, there's an area right there. Got to remove that, you know. It's kind of like the same reason why like conservatives vote against raising taxes when they're like, oh, we're not going to raise taxes on this billionaire. It's like, why? You don't have $1 billion. Yeah, but I might one day. What, when your fucking like, carpet cleaning business takes off or whatever? Bullshit. You're never gonna be fucking Elon Musk. You're never gonna be Jeff Bezos. You're never gonna be any, like, what are you gonna do? Like invent the next fucking Windows operating system? Get the fuck out of here. No, man. But somehow these people have got it in their heads that one day they may be rich or whatever. So I better not raise taxes or whatever on myself. Fucking stupid as hell, dude. So stupid. Anyway, let's see. Lewis the Hedgehog. China is not pro-choice. The government has history of forbidding and demanding abortions. Nazi Germany did the same thing. Yeah, I mean, there was a long time where they did like a one-child policy thing. But I read somewhere that they're actually trying to make it so that, like, if you have a woman, like a girl, then you're not allowed to get an abortion because they're very like, because what's happening is that because of the one child policy that they had for a long time, which I think it's up to two children now, what would happen is that people would just get abortions until they had a son because that's the cultural thing in China is to like have a male heir or whatever, and that's left a dearth of female Chinese like children. So now all these like boys were born and none of them they don't have like enough women in the population to like get married themselves. So like women in China are like in high demand, especially like native born Chinese women, So they're trying to like that's why you get like all kinds of like things like mail order bride systems and shit like that for like women coming from Malaysia and that kind of thing and like, and settling in China. Like they're trying to attract like women from other countries to come there because there's like this such like a disparity in the male female population due to their one child policy. So yeah, I mean it's maybe we just shouldn't like fuck with it at all. Maybe this is like, a good example of how the government should not be in the business of telling people, what kind of children they can and cannot have, or where they can and cannot choose to, to plan their own families. Maybe the government has no fucking business telling women anything about what they want to do with their bodies. I mean, there you go. That's a good example of it going the wrong way, you know. Let's see a few more, and then I gotta end this because it's already 2, so we went 3 hours. Sometimes states put innocent people to death. Does that mean that the state should be put to death also? Yeah. Also, capital punishment has not been an effective deterrent. Don't believe me? Look at the statistics. Yes, capital punishment is not an effective deterrent. It doesn't work at all. That's definitely a true thing. Let's see where we at here. All right, there's a lot of comments, but I gotta get going, dude. My head's hurting here. So, thanks you guys for sticking with me, even though I like went and took like a 2-minute bathroom break where nothing was happening. I hate doing that just because I should be able to get through a stream without having to fucking like take a potty break. But what can I say, folks? I just you know what I need to do? I need to stop drinking coffee while I stream. Here, let's see where we're at. Not half bad. There's a little bit down in this corner down here that I got to address. But see, like when you zoom in on these things like this, it looks all shitty. Like when you zoom in, but when you look at it like the person on screen will be looking at it like this, and it looks a lot better, I think. So I think maybe a little bit more cleaning up, and then maybe we'll color this. Maybe we'll throw some color behind it, and that'll take another 5 or 6 or 7 streams. Anyway, you guys, thank you all so much for sticking with me through this, live stream. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I know that it's bad and you always hear people doing that, but it actually works. When I say like and subscribe, I notice people actually like and subscribe. So thank you for doing that. I just got to do my end of the stream little thing. One of these days, I'm going to quit being lazy and I'm going to actually film something that I can just play at the end of these streams here instead of having to do all this shit every single time. But, what can I say? I actually am very lazy. So let me turn on my other stream, and if you like what I do and you want to support me, then you can buy something from my Etsy shop. This is my Etsy shop here. I sell prints and stuff like that. Hawanja.com. These are all handmade prints that, Lovecraft characters, that kind of thing. Why is that taking so long to open? Anyway, so if you want to give me some money for my streams here, you can do it like that. I also have a Patreon that you can join. I'll put the link down in the thing. If you want to see more of my artwork, you can go to my DeviantArt site here. This is, I put all the artwork that we do in the streams here and also my webcomics. Speaking of webcomics, I have a webcomic at hawanja.com. It's fun for the whole stupid family. It has ninjas in it. It has talking ducks. It has people getting punched in the face, that kind of thing. Please check me out at hawanja.com. And if you want to see me talk about video games and toys and other non-political stuff, check me out on UCD videos there. So anyway, thank you guys all so much. Thank you all for sticking with me. Thank you, Inshelma, for coming. And Adam, thank you for joining too, even though I do not agree with the comment that you just put. Thank you still for joining. Thank you, Lewis the Hedgehog. As always, great to see you. Dynacat loves me. You're awesome. Adversary Fandom too. You're the best as well. Thank you guys for joining me. And I will see you all next Saturday, 11 a.m. I am out of here.